Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
I'm a fan of classic movies.
During the spookiest time of the year, there are a few guidelines all ghosts and goblins should follow. Always stay on sidewalks. Never go to a stranger's house. And never go out alone.
I'm the boogeyman! And I'm coming to get you! You know nothing of hell. Fear flicker.
I'm tired of living in fear.
I'm back.
New to the neighborhood.
Trick or treat!
Trick or treat!
If you are thinking of seeing this film alone, don't.
Julia, let's get this show on the road.
Hello and welcome to Overlapping Dialogue, a podcast of double features dedicated to programming the finest, most eclectic, and downright bizarre film pairings, and cataloging the discussions that ensue. We're your gruesome twosome Kyle and Levi Huffman. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Levi.
It's Spooktober Spooktacular, Levi. Third annual. Mm-hmm. How you feeling this Spooktober?
I'm alright, I guess. I mean, well, like, my life's kind of just been in escrow until this Hudson Middle School soccer season's over. I mean, I've loved it, but I'm just been exhausted for about a month.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Straight, so...
on top of teaching, too.
Yeah, so, when that's over with, it'll be fine. But, yeah, it doesn't really feel like October right now, though. I mean, it is, but,
I mean, I feel like this is happening every year because, we're dealing with global warming and climate change in a roundabout way, but it's like it's not cooler yet. I mean, this next week is supposed to be cooler, but...
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. As I get older and older, I just feel like not only the years go by quicker, but it's kind of like, yeah, we've done the whole Halloween thing. We've done that. I've been there, done that. And I don't really feel that way, though, necessarily about Thanksgiving and Christmas yet, because I just like those holidays a little more. But I don't know. It feels like certain holidays that come through, and like I said, maybe this is kind of sad or morbid, but it's like, I don't know. It's just the same thing every year, and it's kind of, then there'll be another one next year. And, I don't know. It's like when you have 25 of these by now, it's kind of like I just turned 25 this year, which I don't remember. But about 20, probably 2 of them. I don't know. But I'm just kind of like, yeah, all right. Like,
well, I feel like even more so than Thanksgiving and Halloween, or Thanksgiving and Christmas, excuse me. Halloween is belongs to children in terms of the enthusiasm for it. And again, it's at an age where you're not burnt out by it, like you said. But it seems like more and more there are more and more adults who delight in Halloween, and that's a larger problem, I guess.
Yeah. But other things that happened today, though, I wanted to mention that Chelsea won 4-1.
That's a nice victory.
And then they had beat Fulham earlier in the week, 2-0. So things are looking up.
That's good.
Tottenham also won. They're, I think, going to be maybe top of the table, depending on what happens tomorrow with Manchester City and Arsenal. When you'll know that and when we're recording this, but anyway,
Las Vegas Raiders though update.
Yeah, I mean, whatever.
They almost squeaked out a maybe a possible comeback. When you're hearing this, it'll be about 2 weeks ago now. But against the Los Angeles Chargers, or whatever.
Although that sounds as stupid as Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's all stupid. Who cares? I mean, Garoppolo, of course he got hurt. Of course he's hurt. Of course he is. And then Derek Carr got hurt on the same week, a couple of weeks ago. So
seem like to me they're inextricably tied.
Yeah,
in a roundabout way.
That's just the way it's going to be. My
Carolina Panthers are currently 0-4, very likely 0-5 by the time you've
who are they playing tomorrow?
The Detroit Lions. So
yeah,
Detroit's and good. I'm actually proud of Detroit and happy that they're having a better season.
Yeah,
the Panthers' season has been one of the most miserable experiences so far for me as a Panthers fan, mostly because of they're literally like they don't have a good future looking forward because they traded up to get Bryce Young. They traded away their first-round pick, which is now in possession of the Chicago Bears. They also gave up DJ Moore to the Bears, who had a monster night on Thursday night. Had like over 200 yards receiving, like 3 touchdowns, and I've not been all that happy with Bryce Young so far. I mean, I think he's got potential. But C.J. Stroud, who I really wanted them to draft out of Ohio State, he's doing really good right now in Houston, and Anthony Richardson's doing good in Indianapolis. So it's just not a great situation right now. And Frank Wright was never the coach that I wanted either. I wanted them to have Mills, who took over after, so that loser that they had, the last coach, is coaching Nebraska now. Rule got fired. So just not looking great, but that's okay. I've got other things in my life that are shape.
Yeah. I mean, and I was going to say the Raiders are playing Green Bay on Monday night. That could go either way.
Yeah, Green Bay's like 2-2.
Green Bay with Jordan Love now is kind of you never know what's going to happen there.
Yeah,
but all as a relative Panthers fan, just because I am a Panthers fan, I just don't put as much energy and effort because over the past few years, I've really just noticed that I'm like, they just really are not good, and I'm just not going to waste a Sunday afternoon watching that if I don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I started out this season like, okay, let's see what happens, and then did that 2 weeks and was like, okay. Then the Raiders, I just don't get to see them play that often, so that's why I make that more of an event, even when they're going to lose. I'm like, whatever. Because we actually got that game last week.
Mm-hmm.
Which was even more frustrating because I sat through the whole thing,
Yeah.
But anyway.
Oh, well, that's life, as they say. But, Well, we didn't really say what our movies are this week, I don't really think.
No,
Vampyr
never got to that.
From 1932 and Isle of the Dead from 1945.
We're real happy birthday, where's the food kind of like calm down, slow down.
So neither one of these are exactly the vampire movies that I expected. I knew you had seen Vampyr before.
I kind of knew what that was going to be.
And, I mean, it's more of a vampire movie, I feel like, than Isle of the Dead is. Isle of the Dead, as we'll get into, it's kind of part vampire, but also kind of this part undead / semi-voodoo / just creepy.
Yeah, voodoo without
picture,
being voodoo at all, ever. Yeah. Because even the trailer said that, and I was like, okay, I mean, technically in a certain way, but... we'll get to that later. It's actually very similar to another movie I want to talk about here in a little while that I actually think is pretty good, and I think is better than this slightly.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about.
But again, I think they still make for a good pair, and especially from the eras they came from. And again, we're happy to celebrate this Spooktober with you. But before we get into that, you know what time it is. Put that head in that, put your head under the water and dig for those apples, because it's time for the Blue Plate Special.
Hi, Audrey. Mama, have a cup of coffee, please. Sure.
I'll have what she's having.
All right! Who wanted a large pepperoni? Coming up!
Your tub full of lard and mayonnaise on the college game day is right here.
Did I miss it this morning? We talked last time about our
I'm not going to go back into all that.
college game day opening. But do they not have that mayonnaise thing anymore?
They show a really quick moment of another person with a bunch of white viscous fluid on them that I assume is mayonnaise, but I'm not sure.
I was watching. I was like, I don't think I got that.
It's
anymore,
like a new one, and it's really quick. So I think there is, but I also don't have the guy jumping into the mud. Anymore. That's what I'm saying. See, and now we watched it again today, and it wasn't as bad as I remembered it, but it's just missing a lot of hallmarks of that that remained. And then they do the whole Colorado, Mississippi, and it's just like, no, screw this. Like
the hip hop interlude.
Anyway, But so, anyways. Moving on to Wes Anderson, who has got to be a massive college football fan. I know.
He is from the state of Texas, so he at least has
I guess, but he probably Boomer Sooner Baby or something, But
imagine if he made
imagine him making King of the Hill. Imagine that,
like his riff on like the '30s college comedy, and it has a football like sequence in it. His like take on football would be interesting.
Because he's done versions of that before, as far as like sport.
Yeah.
Like in and this is obviously a inherently comedic and funny version of that, of the whack bat sequence in Fantastic Mr. Fox. It's kind of making fun of sports.
Yeah. And that probably gives us a vision of how he sees sports, where he's like, what's going on? Like, I don't understand the rules.
This.
And,
right.
Speaking of Roald Dahl, also. Yeah, in his collaborations.
Roald Dahl.
I say collaborations like you got him on the phone. Like, yo,
he's been
Roald,
dead
like,
forever.
What we gonna do this time?
Well, that's also, I just want to mention that there is a human being who was once named Roald Dahl.
I'm always confused about how you.
It's Roald Dahl.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
Pretty definitively, I think.
And sometimes I miss C and N in there and want to call him Ronald Dahl.
Yeah, but also I think he was of Norwegian stock. I love saying that. Of something stock. I think his family was Norwegian or something. I was just looking this up.
Yeah, it says he was born in Wales, but his dad, mom and dad were both Harold, but it's Harald. His dad.
Yeah.
And so they were Norwegian.
So literally, it's like Norwegian meets Welsh. It's like, of course, it's going to be the weirdest name you've ever heard, Roald Dahl. But anyway,
so. I actually remember we talked about this a long time ago about, remember that Netflix had made this deal with the Roald Dahl estate to adapt something.
Because how Willie became Wonka.
Well, I was getting ready to say, to like quote Bill Simmons and how he talks about people sometimes, like, is Roald Dahl having a moment like between this coming out now and then that's going to be one of the big Christmas movies at the end
literally
of the year.
The only reason that is just because.
I mean, it's kind of a coincidence. I think.
Well, that's a Warner Brothers movie though, right? And they're not making it for Netflix.
No, that's like a Warner Brothers studio release.
Right, that's what's kind of weird about it.
How Willie became Wonka, though, we're gonna find out.
Now, what was it? He said, now. Oh gosh, what did he say? Something up and listen down. No, scratch that. Reverse it. Like, everybody's making fun of but
weirdly, I think I will go see that.
Definitely.
There's actually not a lot of big holiday movies I don't feel like coming out, so I'm like, why not?
That'll be our Babylon of the year.
What a downgrade.
Which I just remembered the other day, that this is a random detail, but I had COVID, back the week of Christmas this last year. And so I didn't get to see Babylon when it first came out. When you went to go see it, we actually planned it, and I was going to go. And then that literally, I was like, I don't think I'm going to go because I'm going to go to the doctor and turn out I had COVID. So I didn't see it for like another week. It was like 2 days, I think, before. Mm-hmm. It was like the penultimate day of the year.
Yeah.
And we went and saw it, and that was when like we talked all about that at the time, but where it was like no one was there, like. There was a couple there, they left, and then another couple came in late, and then they left. Like that movie, oh my god, that movie's just so hard to get through. Oh my god, just such a chore to get through Babylon.
Well, I don't even remember. I don't remember.
The movie didn't make money anyway.
Of that, was it like that? The movie was just so long, and or how quote profane it was, and they were like offended by that. I can't even remember how they acted or whatever.
I think that was part of it with the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
But then the people that came in late Now, they didn't come in as late as the old couple and Beau was Afraid,
yeah.
but it was pretty late. It was like a good 30 minutes into the movie, I think.
That couple will forever have my respect because they literally walked in late,
Well,
didn't get up and leave.
Like I
and be
said,
like, what the
I
hell
think it
is
was
this?
literally because the lady was so old and so decrepit, they literally did not want to get back up to leave.
So, they're like,
so they were kind of trapped, basically, in the movie.
We told this story,
but
a
they
while
didn't.
back, yeah.
But they didn't act like they were trapped.
Yeah.
They were like, "This is the craziest movie I've ever seen," you know. But anyway, no, it's like so. But that other couple in Babylon, I know y'all really care about this and really want to hear about this until we get to the wonderful story of Henry Sugar, which is maybe the dumbest name for anything I've ever heard, by the way. Which is not a value judgment on the actual product, just saying, about the name is like what. But that they literally came in and then left within not too long. And that was like during the studio sequence of like when they're filming that movie. Mm-hmm. That was like a pretty long sequence, And it's like, I don't know, there's really nothing in there that could have offended or made anyone mad, like,
Yeah.
And they and then we were there by ourselves the rest of the time.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I don't know. That just really made no sense to me. But yeah, so how Willie became Wonka will be our Babylon.
Yeah. That's obviously going to
Yeah.
have more people. And
Right.
your son involved, Timothy Chalamet.
One of my sons. Yes.
I feel like, and I'm not even saying this is what I think, I'm just saying what the chatter is, that I feel like he's taking a little bit of a stock hit because of this with certain people in terms of, because he's had a really good last few years in terms of having these very great intentional choices about what he's in, and this is clearly a little bit more of a
I think it's that
cash grab.
It's and it's because Dune. Most people are everybody's gonna be happy with that because it's Dune, even though it is a big kind of blockbuster in quotes movie. Although that's just hilarious, but of course that got pushed back. Whatever.
March, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the actors are still on strike, so I don't know.
That's another thing I was going to mention is the writer's strike is now officially over.
Yeah.
Since we've last recorded, I think the actors, are still striking.
And to further, prolong this intro to the wonderful story of Henry Sugar, we have seen that the late night hosts have come back, and we didn't miss them. No. That was the best part, and it was just like, this is really antiquated, stupid idea.
And I say that as someone who's a general to moderate fan of most of those guys, actually. Like, I think a lot of Colbert, I think a lot of Seth Meyers, I like Jimmy Kimmel. I do like John Oliver, but...
Oh, he's kind of
he's a little category, I find him to be a little self-satisfied sometimes. I think elitist in his own way. And again, a lot of the topics he chooses, I respect, and I don't know. I like him generally, but
also what I think
Fallon is a literal cancer. He sucks.
Well, you heard here recently about all that stuff that came out about what a toxic workplace environment was. It was basically Ellen. So the late night, even dumber version of Ellen. Yeah. Like, just when I thought you couldn't be any dumber, like
you go and do something like this and totally don't redeem yourself.
Yeah, right. You know what the best moment about that is, to further prolong the intro to the wonderful story of Henry Sugar.
We're going to be like Jimmy Kimmel's apologies, the wonderful story of Henry Sugar. We ran out of time.
Right. And that's like our first thing on the list. So, and I feel like we're going to talk more about the other movies in this whole thing even than this.
And again, as we continue
as we continue. But the best thing in that Dumb and Dumber scene is where they like try to high five and just totally miss each other.
Totally
like,
lame and pathetic. Yeah.
Anyway, where were we at? Okay,
Roald Dahl.
Yeah. Well, no. Even hang on. Before that, we were somewhere in the midst of okay. So anyway, the fact that Dune, that Timothy Chalamet was in Dune. A lot of people are, most people are fine with that because it's Dune and it's a more intentional blockbuster and it's Denis Villeneuve and whatever.
Well, yeah, it clearly has a more literary.
But I feel like this, though, how Willie became Wonka, combined with how Robert Zimmerman became Bob Dylan. Yeah. A lot of people are unhappy about that, and also it being a James Mangold thing too. And he's got like a whole question mark about what people think about him. I think both of those things together, a lot of people are just really pissed off about. Just in
don't
general.
you think also it was just like people want to quote take him down a peg by not liking him as much too?
Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah, they just don't want to like him. So no, it's an agenda. I mean, it's the limousine liberals are coming for him. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, yeah, that's part of it, and eventually, and see, that's what's the shame about actors like this is there's all these expectations leveled at them immediately, and I did that in my own way, with Call Me by Your Name and Lady Bird, where everybody's like, all right, you're the guy. Yeah. It's like, can't he just do what he wants to do? Like, which honestly, it seems like he's pretty much done since then of being in, that movie The King or whatever that no one cared about.
Robert Pattinson was also
Hot Summer Nights, or even, oh gosh, what's the name of that movie? The cannibal movie we saw.
Bones and All,
which was really good. Which actually was really good, but like
Guadagnino, of course, did that.
And it's like stuff like that he's just kind of going to do whatever he wants to do, and I'm fine with I don't care. Or Little Women, obviously being connected to Lady Bird, that makes sense. But yeah, I'm actually happy that he's like, I'm going to do what I want to. And even though, he's part of this big thing, it's still not a superhero movie. He's not being Spider-Man or something.
Or doing a Star Wars
movie. He's doing Willy Wonka. So it's like, he does. But I feel like, genuinely, he feels he needs to tell us how Willy became Wonka. Like, I think he needs that.
I wonder if there is part. I don't know what his real life is or his inner circle. I wonder, but I know
from Hell's Kitchen
to an extent what his sense of humor is, and I wonder if there's part of him and his friends like, I'm going to do the Willy Wonka movie. And it's just like that they all kind of look at it in this slightly ironic way, and they're like, think it's all a big grand joke, and I don't know, but we'll see. We'll be back with that with the reviews at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get around that. All right.
Anyway.
Anyways.
To further prolong the intro into the wonderful
Roald
story
Dahl,
of Henry Sugar.
Which, of course, obviously, Wes Anderson, I think he made one of the best movies of his career earlier this year with Asteroid City, which you didn't quite like as much as me, but you would agree that this combined with French Dispatch is like an uptick in what his last few years before that had been.
definitely since Isle of Dogs, which was just a low-key travesty. And I'm not the biggest Grand Budapest Hotel fan either, but that being part of all these, I think it all puts into perspective what his interests are, and thankfully these movies, I feel like, even further clue me into what his interests are in a good way also.
Yeah,
and that I felt, and we'll get to it, had more of that, what I guess we keep calling heart that he used to have, that he doesn't as much anymore. I felt through the majority of these stories, the middle two in particular.
Mm-hmm.
But
so he's already adapted Roald Dahl, of course, with
Fantastic
Mr. Fox, which is definitely, I think, one of your favorites and one that I really have a lot of fondness for. And so he's already dipped his world or himself into the world of Roald Dahl and made it part of the Wes Anderson aesthetic. Here he is again with basically the wonderful story of Henry Sugar, which is the kind of the primary short film of these 4 short films he's produced with Netflix.
It's 40 minutes long.
I know when this was originally announced some years ago, it was implied that this was going to be a feature and that these other short films were also maybe going to be little chapters or vignettes.
Yeah, because I've seen some people, I think Matt Singer said this in one of his reviews for these. It might have been for The Ratcatcher, I can't remember. He said, why do they literally not just make this an anthology movie? Why do they have to split them up like this?
Yeah.
And which is a good question. I don't really know why they did that, because this is the only one of these that has its own Wikipedia page randomly either, as of this moment, I think.
Yeah, 2 of the short stories have pages.
Right.
The Swan and Poison. Yeah. The Ratcatcher does not. But and I got to imagine that, of course, Criterion's going to come in one day and package these together and put them out as its own little set, if you want to think of it like that.
Right. They're always randomly a couple years behind on all his stuff.
They still haven't done
they haven't done an Isle of Dogs.
French Dispatch yet, have they?
Well, even before that, they haven't done an Isle of Dogs, so they're literally going in the order of them.
Right.
So who knows when that'll be? I don't know.
Yeah.
But
down the line. And I mean, we've already seen particularly Netflix and Criterion work together anyway.
Yeah, because they put out
or
Roma, Beasts of No Nation was another one they've put out. Yeah, so they are specializing in that, and I think that's a good way for Netflix to have a Blu-ray market for certain types of movies.
Well,
because
they know, for particular
right.
movies that are going to appeal to cinephiles and that whole crowd and audience that's going to buy physical versions.
Right, and so that's a good thing, and this will all come out that way, I'm sure. Because that's the thing, we keep talking about, I want to get rid of Netflix, or I want to, but then they do things like this, and it's like every time I am kind of thinking about, I don't really use that, and then something like this happens, and it's like, we still have to keep it,
So, Wonderful World of Henry Sugar, along with The Swan, The Ratcatcher, and Poison, were all 4 short films that recently came out. We can kind of talk about this as a general phenomenon, and then we can maybe go through each of the individual short films. Coming after Asteroid City, what do you think this represents for Wes Anderson and his general
what I kind of like about it is that it doesn't really fit any sort of mold because to me it definitely feels like Wes Anderson, clearly. But what I liked about it is it was like 2 stories, or all stories about Britishness, whether it be through Britain itself or India.
And the connection oftentimes between those two
things.
And
so that's something I want to talk about in particular, because I know that last story, Poison, had some controversy surrounding it because of the line about the Bengali street rat, which I'll talk about in a little bit. I feel like that's kind of the point, actually, of that story, and I'll come back to that in a minute, of like, well, that's probably why it's in there, is because that's kind of what the story's about, is the racism of that
and
character.
Particularly how the thing ends, the note it ends on.
And I kind of thought that a little bit too with the first one. That felt a little more like, okay, what's the point of this exactly? And it should be noted that Roald Dahl, especially this year, because randomly it's funny you mentioned having a moment, there's been the whole revision of his bibliography about a lot of things throughout his stories that are offensive or racist or anti-Semitic or whatever. I was seeing versions of that here, and I was also, as a side note, I was interested in this. I was looking a little bit, and now I don't know because I don't know his whole life story. I know he was in World War II, but I think mostly in like the Mediterranean. I was kind of looking. There wasn't any evidence that he ever spent any time in India whatsoever. So I was kind of curious. I was like, did he write these stories because he like lived in India for a while or something, or he visited India? And I'm not saying he didn't, but my minor skimming of his Wikipedia page showed nothing about that anywhere. But anyway, so that is a whole part of his legacy now, is that even this year there's been controversy, I know, from certain circles about saying, why are they censoring these stories. I know Salman Rushdie, who's always out there beating the drum for this sort of stuff, about no matter what it says, it needs to remain what it is, which I mostly support. Well, I support that idea just on the basis of things should be left as they are. That doesn't mean that's a good thing either, though. Because, like, when I have a problem with that, it's the stuff like with him and others' support of, like, J.K. Rowling, for example, that whole Harper's Magazine thing that happened. And it's like, I don't think so. Like, But the point is that, I think these things should be left alone. But I was pleased overall, especially by this last one, because going into it, I knew about that, and I was like, okay, what's this story going to be? And then it actually was what it was, and I was like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense to me. The first one, though, just in general, doesn't make as much sense. But to get back to your original question, before we actually talk about these individually, obviously the main stylistic component of each of these stories that everyone will notice and we'll talk a lot about is that they are shot as if they are theater primarily, whereas people move in and out of these stages,
and also looking directly at the
which
screen.
is very much like the French Dispatch, Asteroid City.
Yeah.
Just by nature of what it is, but also what I liked about this, and obviously they are literally reading the stories, it's like they're narrating them themselves. Yeah. What I like about that, obviously, and Wes Anderson's a very literary filmmaker anyway, is that...
Which is interesting because he's also incredibly visually prodigious, and that's one of the things people know about him, and you don't usually see those two things together in that way, which is what makes him so... frankly fascinating, even in movies you don't totally care for.
And but that with that, I think what works about this is that it asks us, even though it has a lot of visuals, it requires our imagination
to fill in certain gaps,
purposefully sometimes, and not like, I mean, I noticed in the kind of middle two stories particularly, there was an awful lot of like someone with their hand holding something, but it's not there, and so it's asking you to literally imagine that this is happening, even though it's not. And then the last story almost didn't do that, but then the actual kind of MacGuffin of the story didn't even exist at all, it turned out, and that was kind of the point of the story within the story. But that with that, I felt like what I really liked about these is they just felt like what they were, these random stories that were told very quickly, and that they were, and what I liked about that, because I always think about Roald Dahl as a children's writer primarily because of the Wonka stuff, BFG,
Fantastic
Mr. Fox, James and the Giant Peach, on and on and on. But that what I liked about these, they all felt like relatively, the first one not as much, but the other three felt like very adult stories.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I liked about these, is that was a whole part of Dahl's legacy I was not aware of, and something that not that they aren't fantastical, each of them are, but they felt like they were about very adult ideas.
Yes.
And that's something I really appreciated about that, and like I said, the fact that he injected a lot more of the actual emotionality of his previous works into this. So it kind of was the best version of everything it could be, I felt. Mostly between all of them, I think. But
just to talk about some of the cast members, because that's also one of the most prominent aspects of Anderson's films. These are the cast members just in The Wonderful World of Henry Sugar, but a lot of them appear throughout these other ones, especially Ralph Fiennes and Dev Patel, I feel like. Benedict Cumberbatch, Ralph Fiennes, Dev Patel, Ben Kingsley, and Richard Ayoade.
And then also Rupert Friend... was in the middle two.
Yeah, the Swan and the Ratcatcher.
Who was just in French Dispatch and Asteroid City also. So
right.
Yeah.
So what I liked about it is that, these, I think, this could have worked as an anthology film where it just had, like, this handful or two of actors and they just kind of go in these different places and different roles. But I kind of like the era that we live in. We can have like a Netflix as a provider of this to cut these up and let them exist as their own little things, because I feel like if you put them together, we're going to start assigning, and we already are anyways, and I think everything you said is spot on as far as what these mean, but assign these larger meanings and rob each of their own agency. And what I like is that they are clearly part of a, he's like, I want to go do this little thing with these different stories and adapt Dahl again. And so there's clearly for him, not like you said, the stylistic but also thematic unity. But what I like is that they, in the format that they're put out, that they get to exist on their own terms, I think in an ideal world, like, these 4 short films would have maybe played before fall releases that just came out, like, oh, I'm going to go see Killers of the Flower Moon, and then let's say The Ratcatcher plays before that, you know what I mean? Something,
right.
And that they would just play before other things, but, we don't live in a world as much unless it's a Pixar movie or certain things where there's this expectation of a short film playing before a movie.
Yeah, like the only versions of that
just doesn't happen as much unless it's in a repertory environment or in a more of an art house.
Well, we had seen that. We see that with IMAX films a lot, where they'll put out like Haim music, like Paul Thomas Anderson Haim Valentine thing.
Yeah.
So we've seen versions of that, but yeah, primarily stuff like that never happens, which is a shame because you just want to see these things on the big screen, too, in their own way. But
and I did see some people expressing like this whole idea that since these dropped on Netflix, like I lost interest in wanting to watch it in terms of. And we've talked about this before, how things get memory hold, and that's on Netflix now. I'll get around to it, and then 2 years go by, and you're like, oh crap, I never did get around to watching that.
It's like what happened, I think, in a major way to the Underground Railroad, which we talked a lot about when that came out, which is really great and kind of just disappeared into
one of the best works of television in the last few years.
And sure. I mean, people talked about it at the time, but like we said, it's like when you do that, it all gets talked about, and then it's over, and then no one ever talks about it anymore. And it's like, I think very specifically about, I guess, the climactic moment of that whole show, which is that really long take of her burying like something, I can't remember what it was, in the ground, and like how long that take. And I think about that a lot, even just outside of the story. And the book, obviously, being great too, of the Underground Railroad, which everybody does talk about the book a good amount.
Yeah.
But yeah, stuff like that just disappears now. But also, that shows the problem with the society, not so much the format. I mean, the format is the problem, but at the same time, well, y'all aren't talking about it, so that's kind of your problem. I'm just like, so if you're not going to remember or talk about this thing, or if you're not going to say, I should watch that, you should just want to sit down and watch these. That's not something you should just forget about.
And I feel like we spend a lot of time, I think justifiably so, complaining about Netflix or the way streaming happens now, or these platforms. I think it is actually genuinely really cool that this just gets to exist in the format that it does in the year 2023, that we got a feature-length new Wes Anderson movie in the form of Asteroid City, but then we also got these little shorts. And I think he probably clearly reveled in the fact of, I don't really have to have this big uniting theme between these. I can just do these little vignettes, basically, and then exist in their own terms, but maybe have a shared stylistic and thematic interest, which, as you said, fits into his interest in the theatricality of the image and of the performances, which was very much on display in Asteroid City, which has only been developing over the last few movies.
Yeah.
And so,
well, quickly before we get into it, to go back to that idea about things just like I said, being on Netflix or dropping there. I was literally just thinking before our podcast started, randomly, unrelated to this, about The Other Side of the Wind. And I was thinking about how I had to go look for that. It didn't just pop up on there. Page, I literally had to type into it. But actually, that was literally kind of an event movie that I remember we kind of watched at college when I was there with my roommates, of like, there's a new Orson Welles movie that's coming out. And so that was an event movie for us. But it's like, I don't fault everyone for not caring about that, though. You know what I mean? Because it's like, why are they...
definitely more insular even than these are.
But that's what I like about that, is that's still just sitting on Netflix, and anybody can go find that anytime they want to, And so that's the thing, is like, we complain about this, but it's like, well, even cinephiles need to have more intentionality about, first of all, what they watch and what they tell other people to watch. Yeah. And so, for me, I know it seems like to a lot of people in my life, if you're listening to this podcast and you know me, or a lot of people say, you should go watch this. And I say, yeah, okay, and then I never do.
Yeah.
And part of that is simply because I've already got so much on my plate to watch. It literally is not at all like a personal slight against anyone's taste whatsoever. But I'm always like, I've just got other stuff I want to do. Like, I still haven't watched the Irma Vep TV show that was on HBO that literally has Thurston Moore in it also, by the way. And it's like everything I would want in anything. One of my favorite movies, just in general, of Irma Vep was made into a TV show with Alicia Vikander, with all these music by, a lot of Sonic Youth Alongs, and he made it. Too, and so it's like, if I can't get around to that, what makes you think I'm going to go watch something else? Like, so that's all I'm saying, is like, we need more intentionality about what we watch and what we tell people to watch, because it all goes down. I admit, it's all this big rushing, river rapids of content, and it's like, that's why most of it I just don't care about, because it doesn't matter. But when things like this happen, I set my ad down and I listen, But anyway, so...
Well, it really helped, too,
on.
that these were these short films, and we kind of watched them over the course of several days. We didn't sit down and watch all of them at once. As far as, again, individually, The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar is almost this morality tale or play about basically this Henry Sugar, which is not even his real name, apparently it's like being used as a pseudonym, is this rich and arch, and I think Benedict Cumberbatch's casting is perfect for this, just like old British guy who comes across this story, this tale of a man that was played by Ben Kingsley in the flashback, who has the ability to basically be telepathic to a point, not necessarily read people's minds, but see things,
without using
his eyes, and what all that means. And it kind of goes, again, it comes from this smash between Eastern philosophy and Western opportunism, which, again, I feel like you said, a lot of these stories in a roundabout way, I feel like The Ratcatcher and The Swan, not so much, but Poison in this are about that relationship between Britain and the East, particularly Indian culture. So, obviously, The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar is the longest one. I feel like that's the one that's being most offered up as the primary one that people might watch because of the length and the prominent role Cumberbatch has in it. But I really like that one a lot. It might be my second favorite or third favorite of the bunch. And I do like that, again, this is what's fascinating about these movies. I think this one even more so than the other three is that it has this, it seems like something that you would read as a child and it maybe be a step or two ahead of you, even though you understand literally what happens.
Right.
But the adult level of resonance for it.
Yeah.
And in that way, I really liked it and appreciated it.
And I think all these
something
stories
you would stumble
are,
across as a child and not totally understand. But again, it has this fanciful voice and way that would appeal to practically anyone, but it does have a pretty mature message that I like.
Right. And I think all of them are that way, but this one is even more, I think, fanciful and in that way, a more almost magical realism version of that. Whereas the other stories, while each of them being pretty fantastical in different ways, are more poetic and more just like literature almost. But this one was kind of my least favorite one. And I can't really say why. I think also, as much as I like the style of each of these stories, it took me the longest to adjust because it was that long. And I was like, these are the way these stories are going to be told. So when I rewatch it, I'll probably like it a little more. But I wasn't as interested in the story of this one as I was the other ones, I think, because it was part of that Russian nesting doll of stories of, here's this book that Henry Sugar finds. Okay, so it starts with Roald Dahl is telling us this story.
Well, I was getting ready to say, one of the few uniting things between all these is Ray Fiennes essentially playing Roald Dahl as the narrator kind of behind the whole thing, and he's kind of basically sitting in his study almost narrating these, and so that's one of the few through lines of the whole thing. And he also plays characters throughout. Ray Fiennes does. But anyways,
I think he's in all of them as another character. No, actually, I guess it's just this one and the Ratcatcher. I think he's another character. The other two, he's just in as the
I don't think he has another role
the
in
Roald
the
Dahl
Swan
character.
Or Poison, but
so it's that. It starts with that. Then it becomes about, Henry Sugar reading this book about a person, a medical, like a doctor in India, telling a story about a guy who came to tell him a story about not being able to see without his eyes, and all that's fine. But it's like, he's done that before with Grand Budapest Hotel, and so that felt just a little samey to me. But like I said, I do like them. Like I said, that it becomes about a morality at a point of what are you going to use this for, and kind of the question, and that is kind of a very Eastern philosophy anyway, of either Hindu or Buddhist or Sikh philosophies of, what will you do with your human power? It must be something good, or otherwise it would be a waste. And so that being a very kind of generalized truth, I think, does make this wow. I don't want to act like it's totally worthless or anything either. I liked it. It was just the least interesting to me.
The second one we watched was The Rat Catcher.
Which is actually the third one, I think, because we watched them out of order. But
yeah, The Rat Catcher, which is...
my favorite one, I'm going to say, personally.
I quite like it, too. Is basically just this town dealing with a rat problem.
And then the Rat Catcher is basically a rat, maybe?
Basically implies that he has either a spiritual connection to or is a human manifestation of a rat. And the way that Ralph Fiennes plays that, but also the way he visually looks.
He's got these black, beady eyes.
The way he visually looks, he feels and looks like a rat in human form, you know.
Well, also, that was... Because the whole story seems very quiet and calm, and it's just about, okay, like, it's about a problem, but it's not that big of a problem. It's not like somebody's going to die or something. It's like, okay, there's a rat problem.
Because a lot of these other ones deal with life or death scenarios, and this one is literally there's a rat on the loose.
Yeah, multiple rats, but whatever, Or, or maybe it's just Jordan Peterson talking about the rats in Skyfall, talking about a rat king, which, by the way, other people mentioned, like, were you aware of, okay, all right, Last of Us time, all right. So are you aware of in The Last of Us Part 2, there's this whole sequence, it's like one of the more famous things in it, but this whole part in the game where you have to go into the bowels of like the Seattle hospital to go find some stuff for medical supplies for something that it'll take too long to explain. And there's basically that was like the first place in Seattle where obviously the hospital was hit the hardest, and they literally... When the pandemic first happened, they literally locked down basically the basement of the hospital and left it there.
Okay.
And so for 20 years, whatever was down there has been festering, and so there's literally this, and it's like probably I love it conceptually, but it's so intense to play, and I kind of hate thinking about it. But of this thing, it's called the Rat King. It's literally this massive, nasty monster that's like basically all of these different cordyceps victims have like merged together into this one really big thing.
Yeah, definitely not going to play this game ever now.
And it's like, and you have to, it's actually not as difficult to kill as you would think. You have to kind of move around and in this area. It's kind of like the Mr. Freeze thing in Arkham City, except what was cool about that was you had to change your tactics. You just move around. But no, it's like straight up like
horrific.
It is, as Christopher Eccleston would say, it is disgusting. Like, but anyway, so there's a whole Rat King thing there. And that's why, because that's the first time I ever heard that phrase, because that's actually literally when, basically the idea of when these animals get tied up in each other, and that's what a Rat King is, not what Jordan Peterson said it was. But he's an idiot. Yeah. So, But anyway, no, I still recommend playing that game. Don't be too scared. But yeah, it is. No,
I like watching horror movies here and there, but horror video games or something, I'm not doing that.
Well, most of those games don't have that many like jump scares. That mostly you can see what's happening ahead of time. But that is the one definitive thing in those that's like, this is scary. Yeah. But it's kind of like the Killer Croc section of Arkham Asylum too, similar to that. Mm-hmm. But anyway, the Rat Catcher. To further prolong the introduction to the Rat Catcher.
Yeah, but to get to that, like towards the end, has some of the most specific visceral horror imagery that we've ever seen come from Wes Anderson.
And I'm like, I want to see that.
Which, I mean, people have been joking for years, and there's even the SNL sketch that people like to roast and make fun of, which I understand why, of a parody of Wes Anderson doing a horror movie. And seeing that conclusion made you go, oh, wow. Imagining
that's
him
what I was going to say is that
world.
That's what I liked about this, is that it started very calm and was like, okay, we're dealing with this problem. And then became increasingly more kind of morbid and morose as it went along. And like, because there's that whole part where he takes the ferret and the rat and puts it in his shirt and just stands there.
Well, that's just another thing, too, is that sometimes that there are literally characters who walk over that are clearly not characters in the narrative.
Yeah.
They're these almost theatrical stage hands that come up and give stuff. And, like, he didn't have anything in his hands, but he, like, puts it and acts as though it's under his...
Right, and the shirt is supposed to be moving, but it's not, so he's literally just standing there. And getting the description of it. And that's like we said about our imagination is being required to do things that the movie's not doing.
Yeah.
But what was funny about that though, when there was the whole moment where he basically ate the rat.
Yeah.
And that it's like him acting like a vampire, basically, or a rat, and there's like the totally black surroundings and his like eyes and like he's
vampiric, like,
But what was the scariest, because that just gets kind of funny looking. The scariest version of that is when it has that first like reverse shot of him standing there with the beady eyes and everything's turned dark like it's nighttime and the other characters behind him, and it was just like, whoa, wait a second, what is happening? Like. And then the story just kind of ends with the other characters being repulsed by what he did.
Yeah.
And then they're like, well, we never really found the rats either. And it ends with this very poetic question of there must be something in the hayrick or whatever. Like, which made me laugh of the hayrick, like very British. But yeah, so what I loved about that story was that the tone I thought was just really great. And like I said, it made me want to, and that reminded me a lot of Fantastic Mr. Fox, just visually what it looked like and what it was about, sort of. But I think what was your favorite one, and what I think is maybe the best one, is the Swan. You talk a little bit. about
so
that
the Swan is basically, and this is what gets me, is that it's all told from this kind of perspective of a boy who's older, who is talking about this time that he basically got bullied by these other boys, and that he, basically had to go up a tree and then ends up putting on, or, taking the wings from a swan and attaching it to himself and flying. And the implication that, again, throughout this whole experience is that, he lived and whatnot, but then basically the revelation at the end that he didn't, and that gut punch, it's something that really threw me for a loop, because you're not necessarily going into these expecting some big turn like that or twist. And again, I just found it to be what's his name again? Rupert Friend is his name?
Yeah.
Like the actor.
Yeah.
He was actually one of the newer faces in, to me, Asteroid City specifically.
Yeah.
I don't really remember him as well in French Dispatch. Who was he in that?
I don't remember.
But he was.
He was. Yeah,
okay,
but
offhand, I can't even remember
who was he
in.
Was he the cowboy?
He was the cowboy,
yeah,
and then
right.
in the other narrative, he was like this very dressed up actor. You know what I mean?
I think he was British.
In
that's
that what
part.
It implied. Yeah. But anyways, like, he was just this really new, welcome face. I thought in Asteroid City as this cowboy.
Yeah.
It's like it's just not a face you've seen exactly in a Wes Anderson movie. So it was just, he was a new presence that I really appreciated in that, and I really loved him in this and his narration in this.
Yeah, one great thing is his impersonation of British children. Is like, what you doing?
Yeah.
It made me laugh every time he did that. But yeah,
but that one just had the most emotional gut punch to me.
Well, it starts off with them literally
the most tragic out of all of these two.
Well, it starts off, they literally tied him to the a train tracks.
Yeah, railroad tracks.
He lived through that. Then they're like, all right, well, then they made him shoot, or they shot that swan and killed it, and then made him made him terrible. It's a very sad story, really, when you think about it, which kind of is belied by the beauty of the story, though, too, and kind of I think what works about that too is the narration that Fiennes gives it at the end about heroism and courage, and I mean, it really is a story that about bring tears to your eyes, really, and it really, I think that is the best one overall that worked for me in ways that the other three don't, especially the Henry Sugar one is just like. The kind of short form of that really worked better for the poetry of what it was trying to say. It didn't have to take all this time to do this or that. It just was what it was.
All of these do this to an extent, but I think especially this one is that, these short films in general as a format have the potential to do what a great short story does, where it's this sensation that creeps up on you and is surprising and is not going to, it doesn't have to satisfy us in the way that a more feature-length version of a novel or a movie or anything is, that it gets to be like a color or a feeling or a vibe, but there are still complications within that. And I think that's what makes all 4 of these special in their own ways, is that they get to the heart of that in a way that when we watch a feature-length Wes Anderson movie, there's all these expectations, or any feature-length movie, we have these expectations about the shape and form of it, and these get to be these little weird stories that don't have to cohere to that expectation as much. And so I feel like The Swan, for me, was, again, the most emotional out of these, and I really liked. Poison was the last one, and that featured Benedict Cumberbatch returning as this kind of, as you said earlier, basically this racist British guy who's at the hands of trying to be helped by these, basically Indian
or Bengalese people,
doctors, basically. I feel like this one is I liked it, but I feel like it narratively has the least amount going on.
Yeah,
which isn't a criticism necessarily. It's just like it's got the least amount of plot.
I think why that works for this story, though, it feels like the Hitchcock bomb under table. Men talk about baseball, like the whole suspense of the story turns out to have been nothing at all.
Yes,
and that's kind of a spoiler. So I guess that's spoiling it for you.
We're already kind of spoiling different things. Yeah, about these,
and so the story essentially based on that suspense is literally about a snake is on Benedict Cumberbatch's stomach, and they Dev Patel and Ben Kingsley both being sort of doctors. I know for sure that Ben Kingsley is a doctor. I'm not actually sure that I remember exactly what Dev Patel did. I think he just either knew that doctor or worked with that doctor. And interestingly, it never really says what all these people's relationship to each other is, like who this man is, why he's here, and why they're helping him, or what. But anyway, and so they go through all this effort. Turns out there's no snake there, and then kind of him just remarking, "Oh, maybe it was just a dream that you had or something," and then he just flips out and starts basically being racist towards them, being like, "Get out of here" or whatever.
Yeah.
And the story kind of ends with just like Dev Patel apologizing to Ben Kingsley, and Ben Kingsley just being like, "Whatever, it doesn't matter," and leaving, and that being almost a metaphor for the just amiability and reasoning of these indigenous peoples there being, of saying, "Oh, maybe you're just dreaming," and then the white person being like, "I'm not going to be called a fool by you," and just the whole inherent racism of that, which I feel like works for it. I was kind of surprised by. I guess it says Bengali street rat in it, and that's bad, obviously. And
but that character's clearly full of himself and arrogant, and we're not supposed to like him all that much.
So I went into the story though thinking, "Oh, I wonder what this is going to be," because I assumed it was going to be something. The whole story was going to be racist or something, and it was like, no, actually, the story is about racism, not racist itself. But whatever.
Well, we know that anymore that. The people can't delineate between those two things. One thing that I'm really going to remember the most probably about this is Benedict Cumberbatch's facial expressions, acting, which I thought were very funny.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know what all this adds up to exactly for Wes Anderson, but I think it's just take comfort in being a fan of his and saying, "Oh, that this just gets to exist, and it's these little short films, and they don't have to mean something big and exactly." Certainly stylistically, it fits into the direction he's been moving. And I think also, but even in a more explicit, direct way than even maybe he feels like his narratives are allowed to be sometimes. And so this was just a little divergence for him, which I think really works. And again, I look forward to this being on home video one day where you can watch it all. But as of now, it's good that it's just on Netflix.
Yeah.
And, and I feel like almost Netflix should go sometimes more in this category. Obviously, I want them to make more feature films that are good and fund them. But why not, if you have a platform like this, go after some big, high-quality directors and
they just come over here and do this and then
PTA,
move on.
Make some short films.
Well, we did
Anima, of course, with Tom York. But just stuff like that. I think streaming actually has the capacity to be an easier outlet for that stuff than anything else.
That was the other thing I was trying to think of, that there was a PTA movie that was he I think showed that in IMAX before some movie that was in IMAX at the time, or something. But
and a lot of these things, like I know at the New Beverly Cinema in L.A., Tarantino programs some of these things to play before movies that they're showing and whatnot. So again. I really liked all 4 of these, and I like that they exist and that they get to be their own little thing.
Yeah.
Speaking of little things, Taylor Swift. A lot to talk about with Taylor Swift.
Is there though?
Well, culturally there is.
Yeah.
Maybe artistically, well, I don't know. And let me just say.
Well, there is so much. Let me say that.
Yeah.
More what I mean by that. Everybody says it. So what am I going to say?
Well, I don't know if this podcast has ever even approached the topic of Taylor Swift all that much, because let me just say, for me personally, I think Taylor Swift is among the most over-remarked features in modern culture. Now, that also means in a negative sense, too, that I think sometimes people go after her and criticize her just for being, that popular of a pop star. I certainly think her fans are manic, but we're going to get into this in a second. This is part of why we're talking about it. Fandom in general right now is manic across the board, whether it's her, whether it's Beyonce fans, whether it's Star Wars fans, whether it's Marvel fans. Fandom in general is a cancer. It just is.
Well, also, her fans are not the most annoying fans ever, Taylor Swift's. I find Beyonce's to be interminable. And Star Wars fans. By the way, speaking of that, have you seen some of the stuff that's been coming out of this Osaka movie or TV show on Disney Plus?
Yeah.
And there's literally like zombie stormtroopers in it. It's like, what the hell is going on over there?
Yeah.
It's just like when you turn away for 5 minutes, then this stuff happens. It's like.
Yeah.
It's like leaving your 8th grade class.
Well, it also basically resurrected Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah, it's like leaving your 8th grade class to go to the bathroom, and you come back, and you've only been gone like 2 minutes, and you're like, literally, what did you do in that time?
Taylor Swift, obviously...
not that I've ever done that.
As not her country song, but another country song once said, having a record year. Just a lot of stuff going on. We didn't even mention at the beginning with football, everything going on right now with the Travis Kelce relationship.
Yeah.
How that has literally taken over the NFL and certainly the coverage of the NFL in a fundamental way.
And
last few weeks.
The media is eating it up.
Oh,
too.
yeah,
they
for
love
sure.
It.
Yeah, I mean, they're
probably because bullets are being threatened to enter them if they don't.
What's your take in general about that whole situation as far as her relationship
it's the
with
new
Travis
Space
Kelce
Jam.
and...
It's the new Space Jam.
Okay.
It's literally like, let's take these two things and put them together. And I mean, obviously, everyone knows it won't last. I also want to say, there's the whole thing with her to actually defend her for 2 seconds, which is the longest I've ever done so. That everybody talks all the time about.
Your time is up.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, it's like my. I'll look this up while I'm saying this. It's like my Warcraft review, which is maybe my favorite review I've ever written on Letterboxd.
Don't worry, Tay-Tay. We'll get you in just a second.
Hang on. To further prolong this, I swore that I'd write no more than 20 words about Warcraft, and I've already used up 18 of them. But anyway,
Taylor Swift.
Anyway, point is that thing about her. No, thing about her is you know who I'm a Swiftie of is Phil Swift of Flex Seal fame. That's who I'm a Swiftie for. Now that's a lot of damage.
That guy scares me.
Yeah, he is frightening. Now don't forget, he also was in that really stupid Flex Seal, Flex Tape commercial they did for the Super Bowl. You remember they did? So hey, there's a connection.
Yeah.
Who will be? See, he was a Swift in the Super Bowl before she was a Swift in the Super Bowl. Okay. But anyway, so the thing about her I want to defend for like 2 seconds is that she. Everybody talks about all the time. Oh, she'll write a song about him once she broke up. She's done that like 2 times ever.
That's the big
stereotype. And it's like that just gets so stupid and tired. It's
that's just an easy joke.
Well, yeah, and it's also I don't even want to say it's exactly sexist, but it's kind of just like
there's an element to it.
Yeah, but it's like. I don't know. It's just like, so what? I like if she can do whatever she wants to do. She's an artist. Like, is she the greatest artist ever? Is she making music that means anything? No, but she is an artist.
Also, making a breakup song is fundamentally what pop music is about.
Well, it's like Carly Simon wrote a song that we've been debating who it was about for decades, and finally figured out it was actually Warren Beatty. And by the way, Carly Simon is a far worse musician than Taylor Swift, so whatever. But anyway, I mean, anticipation, like no. Anyway, but so all that's just to say that there's a lot surrounding this whole thing that's like, we all know it won't last, but I'm not going to be the guy that says, oh, she'll write a song about it. No, she probably won't, because Travis Kelce isn't interesting enough to have a song written about. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you. Because I'm not a Travis Kelce fan either.
I'm not totally out on him because he'll always, for me, have "Know your role and shut your mouth, you jabroni."
That's so lame, though.
But
don't you know how lame that is, though?
I don't think that's that lame. Following it up with Beastie Boys is lame, though. Like, which he immediately did. He immediately said, well, you gotta fight for your right to party. No. So, but anyways, he'll have that moment. But
I like Bill Belichick.
Well,
he's definitely somebody in football. Somebody in football who just stands there.
Well,
that's kind of what I like.
Also keeps his challenge flag in his sock. Like
wait, really? I didn't know that.
He keeps it down in his sock, like right here, and whenever he takes it out,
like it's a knife he's hiding.
Yeah, well, he acts like it's something to hide. He'll like pull it out and throw it on the ground.
But it's like a knife, like in any movie you see where it's like I got a knife in my boot, like or whatever.
There's this almost 10-minute video of him too getting asked in a press conference. Normally his press conferences are like
legendary.
Gotta win.
We're gonna win the next game,
right,
or we're not. Yeah,
but there was one this was a few years ago, I think, where a random reporter asked him about what's the history in the NFL of when punters became a specialized position, and all of a sudden there's this light switch that gets flipped, and he just gets real enthusiastic and talks for 10 minutes about the history of punting in the NFL.
It's like Lou Harlow getting asked about the Book of Revelation.
Literally that. And then he's like, and I don't even remember all the details of the stuff he says, but it's like, and this year you started to see this, and you had this. He names all these players that most people, including me, I'm a decently football
I'm guessing
fan,
this was even before he was like the Cleveland coach.
Oh, it would have been back before that. In terms of when he was talking about.
So that's when he would have watched football.
Yeah. So I mean, and he was like, and then he was like. He was very clearly like, oh, I want to talk about this, and talk, and then at the end it was like, that was a good question, thank you for that, just like, but and I mean, I don't know, I sympathize with these coaches and these players sometimes of like getting asked the same questions, but also a lot of them, not him, give the same
and similarly
answers,
Jay Cutler, who just DGAF about everything. I kind of respect both those men. By the way, I don't like either of them. Actually, Bill Belichick's a right wing kind of idiot,
but a brilliant coach, of course,
because that's another thing I want to say about Bill to defend Bill Belichick before we get to further prolong the Taylor Swift.
Well, that's going to be the subtitle of this episode. To further prolong this episode.
To further prolong this title of this episode, that Bill Belichick, I think, actually is a genius, because now there's a lot of people who are saying, "Oh, it was just Tom Brady the whole time," and it's like, you don't just have Tom Brady.
And also
winning
Brady
stuff all
specifically
the time,
went to Tampa Bay because they were basically had every position filled except the quarterback. So he didn't just fall into that, and then he played a good season when he won. Don't get me wrong.
But they didn't win Super Bowls consistently.
Well, they won that one. They won that one. Oh well,
Super
Bowl
but yes, they did. I should
with.
Say they did, but But then the next year they were just like abysmal.
Yeah.
So it's like you can't just give all that to Brady there either. And I mean, you had all these other personalities through all those years. Rodney Harrison played there.
In the early years, Mike Vrabel, Teddy Bruschi.
Right.
Actually, those early.
Oh yeah, all these names I forgot about. Yeah.
The first few teams were mostly defensive minded, and he's a defensive minded coach. That's actually what he cares most about. Yeah. And then Brady, he was okay the first few years, but he literally got better as they progressed to the point where they had the best offense in NFL history in 2007.
And his coaching tree has been kind of hit or miss.
Yeah.
But anyway, point is,
which honestly speaks better to him because it shows that he was the one steering the ship the whole time.
Right, that it wasn't just all these other people. But yeah, that's all just to say that obviously Brady was great, but I've heard that a lot in the last few years that he's still coaching people. They're not doing good. It was just all because of Brady. And it's like that's just a really idiotic thing to say. Yeah. But anyway. And Jay Cutler is just a total a-hole idiot that no one liked ever. But I kind of respected how much he didn't care, though.
I remember Stephen A. Smith had plenty of rant when he went off on him.
I've never seen anybody in professional sports care so little about anything
of such a prominent thing that
of being a Chicago Bears quarterback,
starting quarterback.
That's just Anyway.
But we're actually talking about football, and you know this, right? Taylor Swift kind of put football on the map with
because
Travis Kelce.
Yeah, because he wasn't anybody until that. Oh, yeah, guy that won 2 Super Bowls. Yeah, he wasn't.
Well, there's been all these social media videos of women talking to their husbands like, "Oh, she definitely put him on the map," and the husbands flipping out and losing their minds.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean? He's an all-pro tight end. He's been in Super Bowl, and like feeding all that. And it's like, well, we're both kind of acting idiotic here. In a
Yeah,
roundabout way.
and let me
Like,
say,
of course.
as a lover, and I'm not even saying this like I support equal rights for women, but as a lover of female culture, and a lot of things that men would find chick flick or gay, whatever that means. It's something I say all the time. I don't even mean this towards even women either. There's a lot of men that are this way. When it's like, oh, the Super Bowl happens. Oh, I'm going to score a home run, or I watch it for the commercials. Right? No, it's all right. You don't know about this thing. Be an idiot. That's okay. No, about this one thing. Because I'm an idiot about a lot of stuff. Like I don't know about.
But you don't act like an authority on it.
And I don't act like it doesn't matter just because I don't understand it.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like. I can't think of anything in particular because I just don't care right now. But, like, I'm not going to act that way towards something just because I don't know about it or I don't care about it.
Or, like, say, the sport of tennis.
Yeah, I'm not going to be like, oh, whatever, or like, yeah, and especially now that I've kind of broadened my horizons of watching different kinds of sports.
Yeah,
like
was soccer the biggest one?
Yeah, and even just watching baseball highlights every morning on ESPN. I'm not like a big baseball fan now, but I follow it to the point where I'm like, okay, look at that catcher, look at that run, or this thing, and I appreciate it more that I've watched it more, But that's something that frustrates me so much about the Super Bowl and football in general, is that it's like, oh, now we're looking over here because this thing's happening. That's all just whatever. The real show is this thing. No, you're an idiot. Go the hell away. Like, I don't know how else to say it. Like, and I'm saying that towards the Swifties right now.
I know we've talked
unless
about this
you are a
too,
Taylor Swift fan and
Super
you
Bowl
like football too, whatever. But that anyway.
But I'll tell you who doesn't care: the NFL.
No,
they don't care. They want all the eyes. They want all the views. There were even some social media.
Roger Goodell is getting a Taylor Swift tattoo on his butt right now. What Mama don't know won't hurt her, kind of thing.
There were some social media videos coming out of like some women who were massive Taylor Swift fans. I think this was with when they played the Jets previously. The Chiefs did, and.
Which was a closer game than everybody was expecting, by the way.
Yeah, and like Zach Wilson actually played really well, and Mahomes had like maybe 2 or 3 interceptions.
Yeah, he hasn't been playing that as
well.
Good
Joe
this
Burrow,
year.
he's like fell off a cliff. He's injured. He's actually injured. I know.
Oh, really?
But he's still playing
after all that money.
Yeah,
it's almost like it's a morality tale. Yeah. Like to further prolong this introduction to the wonderful story of Henry Sugar. But yeah,
but there was this video of a woman's like, I spent like a lot of money to come to this game. I don't even know what's going on, but Taylor effing Swift's up there. And it's just like, you get a better view watching on TV. Like,
it's like, I did that when Jerry Richardson was in the box up above me.
It's back when Panthers had good ownership.
Right,
It's a fairy tale now.
But speaking of wonderful, to further prolong... Anyway, yeah. So all that to say, that's totally ridiculous. But another story.
But I mean, she's been big for a while, but this year in particular has been stratospheric. I mean,
well, because she's been doing this whole Eras tour, which is her basically packaging together all these different versions of herself,
financially,
which is genius.
Business-wise,
I mean, that's like the only person I can think of who could do something like that is just like Bob Dylan or a Bruce Springsteen concert where they've made that much music. Put the chicken. I was about to say something else. Put the chicken fingers down, like
Springsteen once said.
We just want to put the clip of that in here.
Yeah, well. I want you to put the chicken fingers down.
To further prolong this, I want to talk about how much I now love Bruce Springsteen. Which is true, but anyway.
All right, so a lot of us didn't get to go to the Taylor Swift Eras Tour concert, but have no fear. There's a documentary that was made, a concert documentary made called The Eras Tour. It's already doing record business.
$100 million in pre-sale.
Which is crazy. Especially for a concert movie.
It's like $1/10 billion already. For a concert movie that
didn't even come out yet. Yeah. And I've even I was curious, it comes out it actually will be coming out this day, that this episode releases on the 13th.
Yeah, because originally it was going to come out, I think, a week ago, and it was going to be The Exorcist. It was going to come out with The Exorcist Believer. Did you hear about this?
Oh.
No, that was, I think.
Was it Saw and Paw Patrol also came out the same?
And Exorcist.
Saw Patrol, people were saying. For that, I know, The new Saw
No, well,
movie
did you
and Paw
see? Did
Patrol.
you see on my my story? I put up a picture. I literally went by the Golden Ticket Cinemas up in Lenore last night just to buy popcorn because I just want popcorn.
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
So
Movies,
and literally,
popcorn.
Movies. I love my popcorn. Movies, popcorn. To further prolong this movies popcorn story, but no. So and then I was walking in and I saw on the marquee The Exorcist, Paw Patrol, and I was like, now it wasn't The Exorcist : Paw Patrol. If it would have been that, I literally would have crapped in the parking lot on myself.
That, yeah.
Well, and then there was like 2 seconds where I was like, because they didn't really have anything to do last night after
the power of the blue line
soccer.
compels you. Yeah.
After.
Well, real quick, since we're just adding stuff,
right?
Like, we might have talked about this before. I don't know, but like, there's obviously, and we would agree with a lot of criticisms about police and police culture represented. That there's been all this stuff about like, is Paw Patrol behind like police brutality and is implicitly behind it? It's like, no, it's for freaking kids. It's like freaking animals dressed up like cops.
I think that sometimes,
you know what I mean? Come on, grow the hell up. Like, I don't know.
Put the chicken fingers down. I mean,
there are so many criticisms to actually say, why are we going to waste our time talking about Paw Patrol?
Well, yeah, because like that's one of those
police
things. Like
brutality.
they're actually. That's just insane because it's like, no, that never happens in that show. There's not like.
Well, the idea even is, and it's a little more sophisticated than that it is getting kids to like and get behind law enforcement implicitly by promoting them as characters.
Yeah.
In a way that primes the pump and lays the groundwork for them to support back the blue and support the police. Like, you know what I mean? It's
or
like
even just to understand, even to not even. And I am somebody who criticizes law enforcement a good amount in my life, so just let that be known. But also just the idea to just understand and even just in a basic level respect law enforcement and the rule of law. I hate using that term because it's been hijacked by the right, but just the idea of laws and rules as a basic concept. I don't find that to be a negative impact, like,
Saw Patrol.
But piranha. But anyway, that there's some stuff like Paw Patrol that is far more benevolent and basic to the point than people give it credit for, to the point of why are we even wasting time talking about this is supporting police brutality or the fascist police state. Like, it doesn't even make sense. It's so, things are far simpler than people make them sometimes, I think.
Yeah.
And have intentions that are far simpler and dumber almost than that even. But anyway, to speak to that, originally, so yeah, The Exorcist, Paw Patrol.
Yeah.
But there were 2 seconds where I didn't have anything going on last night. I was standing there, I was like, should I just go in and see this Exorcist movie? Because I've heard...
It's getting ripped big time.
Which is honestly shocking because I have at least the most basic faith in David Gordon Green to say, who actually, I'm not going to call him like a secret genius or anything, but has been behind a lot of good things in the culture the last so many years of the Eastbound and Down,
I was gonna say all the Jody Hill
and Vice Principals and Righteous Gemstones, like, but
McBride shows.
Those are, he's behind those. And then I know they're not the best things ever, but especially the second one. But these Halloween movies have been okay. Fine enough for the best versions that they can be of themselves. Almost, especially that newest one actually was halfway kind of good. This, though, I was shocked to see, this actually is really bad. But anyway, that was originally, it was going to be Extra Swift, and people were talking about that in the way of Oppenheimer and that. But it's interesting, Saw Patrol that's happened with. But anyway, so they must have pushed this back a week or a couple weeks.
Next week.
Yeah,
well,
right.
when this episode's dropping is when
the whole Taylor Swift Eras tour.
So anyways, it's already sold over $100 million pre-sales, which I know this is a huge shot in the arm for the movie theater industry right now because of how struggling it's been since the strike's been going on. One thing I wanted to draw attention to is there's been a lot of talk. Originally, Taylor...
Not to be confused with Newsmax, but what's the difference?
Taylor had this tweet, Ms. Swift.
Ms. Swift. It was like USA Today or something like we're talking about.
Where she tweeted about, this is back on August 31st, Eras Tour has been the most meaningful electric experience of my life so far, and I'm overjoyed to tell you that it'll be coming to the big screen soon. Starting October 13th, you'll be able to experience the concert film in theaters in North America. And she's got a link. Tickets are on sale now. Eras attire, friendship bracelets, singing and dancing encouraged. And this then sparked this debate online of people saying, well, like, does that mean we can, act out in the theater? This is from, I'm going to read a little bit from an article, by the way, from Newsweek called Yes, You Can Sing at the Taylor Swift Eras Concert Film. This was a quote that's in here from, it says, Dr. Lucy Bennett, lecturer in media audiences at Cardiff University in Wales, told Newsweek that the cinematic experience would echo the live performance and create a sense of, quote, home for fans. Quote, concert films such as the Taylor Swift era film can play such an important role for fans. They may not involve the artist physically present in front of them, and they might not actually be live, but just as concerts themselves can function as meeting places for fans to come together, so can these concert films. Fans can physically be part of a collective that share the same feels. Just like a live music concert, they may have their individual thoughts and experiences, but at the same time, excuse me, they are part of a collective experiencing it together who also understand and feel the value of music. And then there was this talk, and there was even some TikToks made of fans talking about how balls out they're going to be about it. And then also AMC said that as long as you're respectful of your fellow patrons, that singing and dancing is encouraged. Yeah. How do you interpret this phenomenon?
What do you mean?
So,
because I understand what you're saying, but
on one hand, obviously, this is not a literal concert,
right?
But there are going to be so many million more people who are now able to experience, and I say in quotes this, through this movie as opposed to going to a concert. We've talked a lot about theater etiquette, how people should act in theaters. And part of me doesn't even want to get annoyed by this because you're probably not going to be going to the Taylor Swift Eras Tour movie if you don't, or if you're not going to be semi-comfortable with that experience. But nonetheless, is this something that you think is, quote, a problem in terms of a possible mode of behavior?
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, I actually don't think it's as big of a deal, mainly like
I'm not even going to try to make it as a huge deal, but I'm just saying it is, quote, breaking the protocol of what how we in particular and other cinephiles, the experience we hold the theatrical experience to be. But
yes, but yeah, I think that it doesn't matter in the sense of like, if you're going to be there, you're not going to care. You're going to be. It's a Taylor Swift concert movie. And it's kind of like it's like when you went to go see Rolling Thunder Review, how it was like people were clapping and acting like it. That's fine, whatever. Yeah. But just in general, I mean,
well, this is going to be a whole other level. That was boomers I was seeing it with.
No, I know, but I'm saying yes. Oh, I know that.
Something's now, right? Teenagers too.
But they'll have their phones out. I mean, as far as theater etiquette, it's a disaster. But I feel like we're going that direction anyway, so I don't feel like this is going to.
But that's what I'm saying. I think this is going to actually accelerate it several levels beyond what it already is.
Yeah, it could.
But again, I'm also like, I don't want to be.
So is Alamo Draft House going to show the movie or what?
Well, I don't know.
By the way, this all reminds me of a tweet I was looking for here of it talking about that whole thing that they put out. And then somebody said, audience is 150 minutes in The Killers of the Flower Moon, 0.5 seconds before the first performance of the Eras movie Next Door, and it's the shot of Aunt May
before Green Goblin bursts
bursts. But anyway, I think you're right, though. It is going to make it worse. But
again, I don't want to be too much of a grouch about this because, again, you're probably not... if you're going to this experience, you're not going to care as much about that kind of thing on average.
Right.
So I think within that audience, it's fine. But I'm just worried about the precedent that this is going to maybe set and continue. But nonetheless... all that to lead up to... whatever.
Yeah, I don't care.
Story. Yeah. And it's, again, like I said, I know this is going to be a big deal for theaters that have been really struggling over the last several months.
Yeah.
And again, it's like Eras Tour. It's Barbenheimer. It's like you wrote about this brilliantly when you wrote about it. It's like we have to engineer these massive event things to make theaters relevant again. You know what I mean? They can't just be relevant.
It can't just be the fact that I'm literally taking off work to go see Killers of the Flower Moon. Don't worry, it's a work day. So it's, a teacher work day, so it doesn't matter. But it's like, no, I'm literally taking off work to go see that movie. Like, it can't just be.
Well, we talked about this in the past. Like when The Irishman came out, like
we got up early that day, and it was the day before Thanksgiving. I remember it was like that Wednesday. I literally got up that day. We went downstairs and watched it. And it was literally, like I said, it was like Christmas morning. It was like, it wasn't this whole, man, how am I going to get through this? It was like first, second, now go. Yeah. Like, and so, I mean, whatever. Like, but
I wanted to briefly also talk about this Rolling Stone.
Yeah, I actually didn't look at this whole thing yet.
I wanted, and I kind of
do that.
I kind of wanted to not, at least maybe you not look at as much of it and just react to things I'm going to read. In the moment.
Then you do that. Then,
if you want to do that,
yeah.
Now Rolling Stone's lists are notorious. People complain about Rolling Stone's lists all the time.
People complain they weren't on the cover of the Rolling Stone,
but specifically with like music rankings and how they'll go back and say, "Oh, we love this," and when it came out that they didn't, the
that was kind of your fault.
That happens. Yeah. So feel free to look actually while I'm doing this, but the 50 worst decisions in movie history. Let me just say this banner image. Oh my God, it's a banger. We got Jar Jar
Best
Binks,
part's the Love Guru.
Taylor Swift from Cats. So Ernest. Of course, Mickey Rooney from Breakfast.
Oh,
at
I thought that was
Tiffany's.
Stacy Keach. Oh yeah, okay. Oh right, yeah.
And then Mike Myers from The Love Guru.
Yeah.
So they basically made this big list of what we think are the 50 worst decisions in movie history, which is a very open-ended thing. I mean, that can take on a great many forms.
Yeah. When they've made a habit of this, it looks like, because they've done versions of this with TV, music. So
I'm not going to go through all these, but I do want to read some.
I'm looking at them now. Also.
Number 49, Will Smith turned down The Matrix and Django Unchained, which that's been talked about in recent years.
Yeah.
Number 48, Michael Bay decides he's the man to tell the story of Pearl Harbor. 47, this is actually funny. Ernest goes to Africa, need we say more?
Yeah, and the picture there too. Wow.
Which I've never even seen that one actually.
No.
And it goes through. Here's another one. We've talked about this. Francis Ford Coppola cast his daughter Sophia in key role in Godfather 3. I think that's one of the most overrated, over-talked about talking points.
Talk about one that was before that you didn't mention here was about The Postman.
What does it say there?
That movie says Warner Brothers gives Kevin Costner $80 million to direct a movie about a post-apocalyptic mailman. Yeah. Let's see.
Making The Hobbit into 3 movies, I'd put that in the top 10. But okay.
In what?
Making The Hobbit into 3 movies.
Yeah. Including a rape scene in Revenge of the Nerds. Is one
38, Steven Spielberg tries to prove he can direct a comedy with 1941. We've talked about that movie in the past, of course.
Movie 43.
Yeah. 36, Elvis goes to Hollywood and hits rock bottom with Kissing Cousins in 1964. 34, Michael Cimino kills the 70s auteur period with Heaven's Gate. So, like, what are they saying here that it was...
I thought it was going to be killed horses in making of.
Well, by the way, look at that image, by the way. It literally looks like a painting.
Yeah.
So, what are they saying? So, they're saying it's Cimino's fault that auteurism of New Hollywood ended, which this has been blamed on him for a long time.
Well, can I say something before we get... And everybody knows we love Heaven's Gate.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it's probably one of my 30 favorite movies at this point. Like, I love Heaven's Gate, and I don't care that you don't.
Yeah. Well, I do. But
no, I'm saying you,
in general.
you, not them. Not you, but you. You know what I mean?
You know what I mean?
The editorial we. But no, that when I do my film club in a couple weeks, when that starts up, one of the things I'm going to do is show the town sequence towards the beginning of the movie in Jackson, Wyoming. Sorry. Casper, Wyoming,
Yeah.
Of the whole hustle and bustle of that town and everything going on, to talk about mise-en-scene. Well, I tested this out on each of my classes one day last week, and I just showed them that scene because there wasn't anything that bad in that scene. So I was like, I'll show them that. I have actually never witnessed a group of kids more randomly enraptured by something.
Mm-hmm.
I was shocked because I was like, oh, they won't care.
Yeah.
They were like, a couple of them were like, I want to keep watching this. I was like, hang on. I literally stopped. I felt like I was going to have a heart attack. I was like, hang on a second. Just wait.
Yeah.
I was like, so some of you I know are being a little sarcastic about this. Is like, are there those of you actually in here that are telling me that you want to watch more of Heaven's Gate? And they were like, yeah. And I was like,
well,
I'm taking the rest of the day off.
Yeah,
like
that sequence in particular. I mean, when
yeah.
I first saw it, it felt like you time traveled. You feel like you're literally seeing.
Well, and that's
something
what
that
my
you
whole
could never
point was
see in the movie.
Right, and that was what my whole point was of showing that, was showing what mise-en-scene is supposed to do.
But what crap is this? So they're going to blame
no, that's what I'm saying. It's like,
for that?
So I'm just so done with that whole attitude towards this movie, and thankfully people are coming more around on it. It's taken this long, and I'm like. And I explained to him how much money it lost. It was an equivalency now would be $170 million. It was made for then equivalency, and it only made 13. That is a massive loss. I think it was like something, and then 3.5 million was all it made. And so, and I explained. They said why. They asked me why. I said there's multiple reasons. And number one, the movie was so long. Secondly, people were getting tired of seeing this kind of movie. And the production and all the press surrounding
production
it.
assistant.
Right. And so, I'm just so done with it. I actually want to read this out loud, see what it says. For a glorious moment in the 70s, visionary directors like Martin Scorsese, Stanley Kubrick. This is the first time I'm reading this. So, Stanley Kubrick, Francis Ford Coppola, Robert Altman, George Lucas, Sidney Lumet, and Steven Spielberg. Okay, you named way too many people there, first of all. It should have been less.
Yeah, I think we would agree Kubrick's name could go off of that.
Yeah. Seized control of Hollywood from the major studios. They were allowed to make big-budget movies like The Godfather, Star Wars, A Clockwork Orange, and Taxi Driver, without suits breathing down their necks and denying them final cut.
Every one of those had suits breathing down people's necks, but whatever.
This gave us some of the greatest movies ever created, but it all came crashing down in 1980 when Michael Cimino followed up The Deer Hunter with Heaven's Gate, a western starring Jeff Bridges, John Hurt, and Chris Christopherson. The shoot was an endless series of disasters where the budget swelled to 4 times its initial estimate, and the cast was nearly driven to madness due to endless retakes. When the original cut bombed upon its first run, the studio took it back and trotted out a shortened version several months later. By that point, nobody cared. Many critics today regard Heaven's Gates as a misunderstood classic, but that didn't stop it from doing significant damage. The debacle was one of the primary reasons studios took control back from the directors in the 80s, ending the glorious auteur era. Another movie that they didn't mention that actually is seen as a great movie is Apocalypse Now, which did make money, but also was like, we're not doing this anymore. So I mentioned that to the kids, too. I was like, and yes, I'm saying all this to 8th graders, by the way, but I'm like, so Apocalypse Now was another movie that a lot of people did like, did make money, but was another reason why.
But certainly in the media, it prepared the venom
in
the system that got injected into Heaven's Gate.
Right. So that's all literally the dumbest effing thing I've ever seen.
So it even acknowledged, some people think it's a classic now, but it ended auteurism. No, I don't get that. Number 33, we're going to follow that up with this. Sewing up Deadpool's mouth in X-Men Origins Wolverine. How about number 1 should be the fact that Ryan Reynolds has a career, period. Next. Number 32, 20th Century Fox gives up Star Wars merchandise and sequels rights for $500,000. Famously, during the production of Star Wars, Lucas saw ahead and did that.
The next one.
Well, also the image here, too.
Yeah, that's more what I was laughing
at.
The
toy tries to make slavery funny. I've always heard
Is that Jackie Gleason?
That. Yeah, that's Jackie Gleason in the middle.
I didn't know he was in that. Oh, okay. Yeah, I was laughing at Richard Pryor.
That's what I was saying. Is Jackie Gleason's in the middle,
right?
But I've always heard that movie is racist and not good. Oh, what do you know? Look here.
Yeah.
Look who here. Number 30, American Beauty wins Best Picture, 1999. Over 400 better movies.
Yeah.
We talked about obviously American Beauty.
Cats
number 28. Never still did see that. Number 27, Michael Orr. Portraying Michael Orr as a simpleton who needs to be taught football by Sandra Bullock.
Well, that's been a whole thing recently, obviously, about that as far as what's like how much did they like kind of screw him over?
The depiction,
yeah.
Number 26, Mel Gibson perpetuates anti-Semitic myths in The Passion of the Christ. Number 25, Alien 3 gets taken away from David Fincher.
24.
Mike Myers pisses away a quarter century of audience goodwill with The Love Guru. I always judge myself by the movies I even thought about maybe wanting to see.
Yeah.
That was one of those that I remember when it was coming out, I was like, oh, maybe that. And I'm like,
was that that? And Don't Mess with the Zohan were like around the same time.
And Adam Sandler he's nearly had the negative impact that Mike Myers.
Mike Myers is actually funny half the time anyway.
Yeah. Magnificent Ambersons gets butchered. Number 23. Number 22. The Good Earth casts white people as Chinese farmers. I've heard about that. You can even look there too and see that it's like.
Oh yeah, there ain't no way that guy's Chinese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Number 21. Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway are handed the wrong envelope. Once Upon a Time in America, cut beyond recognition for its American release. That just feels randomly put in there. Whoopi Goldberg teams up with a dinosaur detective.
Yeah, that is dumb.
I always remember, that's one of those movies I remember seeing the
Theodore
VHS
Rex.
cover for.
Yeah.
Now this is, alright, so we're going to get into some big stuff here. Number 18. This is 18. And go ahead and take a look at what the next one is, too, that follows this. No, maybe it's 16. Yeah. That they're saying that is worse than the Hays Code.
Yeah.
But number 18 is Hollywood censors itself with the Hays Code. That would like be, in a list this dumb, it would make sense it'd be in the top 5, but it's like, and the Hays Code was a bad thing, but let's not act like we don't totally understand and know why that was even created in the first place at the same time.
Yeah,
right?
I think that Hollywood censorship is one of the most overly talked about concepts, because to me, I think it's baffling that anyone would think, oh, anybody should be able to see any movie anytime, wherever.
Like no censorship.
Like,
period,
no, I mean, we need to be, like, okay, so snuff films, you'd be all right with that. Like, that's something you'd find acceptable, And I know that's, like, not what we're talking about here, but it's like, there needs to be some form of censorship. Censorship is not always a bad thing, even though most of the time I think it is.
Well, the Hays Code in particular, like, really took away a lot of the sexuality and violence of late 20s, early 30s movies. And obviously none of that holds a candle to what you'd see in a PG-13 movie now.
Oh, yeah.
But, again, I think it is unfortunate and it kind of handicapped a lot of things, but let's just not act like it was totally unnecessary at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Number 17, Gus Van Sant creates a shot-for-shot recreation of Psycho. Number 16, Jar Jar Binks.
I'm surprised it's not higher. But
well, don't forget, and I've got this cover, that they once put this performer on their cover.
This is maybe the best one, the way it's written.
Number 15, MGM gets a teenage Judy Garland hooked on prescription pills.
Which isn't even the actual lyric in You Can't Always Get What You Want, but yeah.
Number 14, Columbia Pictures passes on E.T. and Back to the Future and Pulp Fiction. Somebody's getting fired. This should be even higher.
Yeah.
Number 13, Breakfast at Tiffany's. Tiffany's cast Mickey Rooney as a Japanese caricature.
Can I say about that I've never seen this movie. I've never read the Truman Capote novel either. But the next one, sorry, I was already laughing at just the image, not even what it's saying. That was something that in early YouTube was already seen as racist. Yeah. This was in the 2000s. So I don't think people forget how racist the 2000s was.
Yeah.
But no, even then, I remember seeing the image all the time and not knowing what it was from, and people being like, this is so bad. Yeah. And I didn't even know really at the time what they were talking about. But yeah, even then, it was seen as racist. And I know that don't sound like that was that long ago, but I don't think people know how much has changed in 20 years.
Right.
But anyway.
Number 12, Jerry Lewis tries to make the Holocaust funny. Of course, that's referring to The Day the Clown Cried, which is a movie he shot about a clown in a Holocaust camp that is basically buried, but there's a chance it can maybe be seen one day. And apparently there's a VHS tape that has circulated around Hollywood, and certain people have seen it. But number 11, John Travolta is allowed to make a Scientology propaganda movie. Of course, that's
Battlefield Earth.
Battlefield Earth. Yeah. All right, the top 10. Number 10. Oh,
Yeah, this actually is really bad.
Using real untrained lines in the Melanie Griffith movie
Roar. Yeah, that I've always heard of as being a real thing, and that's, bad.
Number 9. Ronald Reagan tells the House Un-American Activities Committee that the Screen Actors Guild is full of communists. Not good.
You notice the superimposed image of him also, or like reflected image, or whatever you call that, of like in that picture? I don't understand what's going on there. Anyway.
Number 8. Warner Brothers loses Home Alone to Fox over a measly $3 million.
Look, can I step in here to say something really quickly?
Yeah, okay.
So, have you noticed with the majority of these, it's saying this company made a bad decision, and like
I don't know if you've seen number 1. That's basically what number 1 is.
Yeah, it's like worst decision moves here. Say worst decision for them, maybe.
Yeah,
I could care less what studios movies.
Well, it's a combination of that, but also like problematic / cancelable. Things going on,
right?
You know,
but it's like that doesn't matter, though. You know what I mean? It's like, does it matter actually whether or not Warner Brothers or Fox got Home Alone to the consumer? No. So therefore, these shouldn't even be on these lists.
Well, that's the thing. It's combining audience. Things that would damage an audience's experience mixed with problematic / politically incorrect things mixed with these business decisions that don't exactly
the business stuff just I would say is what doesn't make sense to me. Now, and the next one should be probably number 1.
Number 7 here is Twilight Zone movie fails to take proper safety precautions. An adult and 2 children die. People actually died because of what happened here, so I'd say that's actually more serious.
That's marked right near Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers didn't get Home Alone.
But, Levi, even worse than that was the fact that Phil Lord and Chris Miller got fired from Solo mid-production.
So the fact
that 3 people died is not as bad as Solo Phil Lord and Chris Miller not get to do Solo.
Like, another one would be like Max Landis is Born, but that's not on here.
Number 5, Matt Damon turns down Avatar, including 10% of the backing. This is a more recent thing that he talked about and mentioned. I think Matt Damon's still doing okay, though.
But this is another one where it's like, I don't care. His money does not affect me.
Right.
Because when I see this, I'm thinking about, okay, like I said, how's the audience affected, or what's this thing that happened, or this bad thing happened on set. Like, I don't care about money of people, because these people, guess what? They all still made their money.
I mean, this would be different if it was like Christian Slater. You know what I mean? Matt Damon is one of the biggest actors in the history of the business, so who cares if he missed out on that? All right, number 4, Will Smith slaps Chris Rock at the Academy Awards.
That is pretty reverberatory in a way that I haven't seen anything be in a long time.
I still can't help this particular angle of Will Smith's face, almost like a little smile, almost like of him when he smacks Chris Rock.
Yeah,
remember that?
Yeah.
Number 3. Now this is one of those business things that actually does have a larger reverberating impact, I'd say. Blockbuster gets an offer to buy Netflix for $50 million in 2000, turns it down. Of course, the fates are now reversed with that. Oh wait, I thought that was I remember number 2 being number 1, but
I remember what number
2. Burt Reynolds turns down James Bond, The Godfather, Star Wars, Pretty Women, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Burt Reynolds, of course, was one of the biggest stars of the 70s. Wait, but look,
yeah. Okay.
But go back up. So, okay, James Bond. Let's go back. Let's go through each of these. James Bond. Is James Bond in any way better if Burt Reynolds plays James Bond?
No.
The Godfather.
No.
Star Wars. Obviously, that probably would have been Han Solo, I guess is what that's referring to.
Yeah, and it wouldn't have been better. That's the thing that fits him the most.
Right. I don't think he would have been better than Harrison Ford, but that's like, maybe. Pretty Woman, I guess that's the Richard Gere role. Maybe. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. You tell me he's going to be Jack Nicholson in that?
No, but I could see a different version of that as him, but no, he ain't going to be as good.
Yeah. So, what, do we got like 2, maybe 3 on that list that would even...
Yeah. Now, I will say this one is on the level of something I can understand of, okay, yeah.
Well, also the way it phrases it here, too. racist movie, The Conqueror, gives its cast cancer, probably definitely kills John Wayne. Of course, that movie is a basically. That's one of those things. Every time I hear about that, I'm like, "Wait, did that really happen though?"
Yeah,
like,
it did. Yeah, because I've heard about that. You know,
am I
yeah.
misremembering everything about that movie? Because it sounds like the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. But he played Genghis Khan.
Yeah, so I'm just going to read this out loud so that we can. The 1956 historical, because if you've never heard of this, this was a real thing. The 1956 historical epic, The Conqueror, was awash in bad decisions before they even started shooting the damn thing, it says. The lead role of Mongol conqueror Genghis Khan was originally written for noted non-Asian actor Marlon Brando, which would have been absolutely ridiculous. When he dropped out, they didn't move on to an actual Asian thespian that could play the role of credibility. They went for John, I believe in white supremacy, Wayne. Did they slather his face with makeup and use rubber hands to pull back his eyes? They sure did. If that wasn't insane enough, they decided to shoot the movie at nuclear testing sites around Utah. It's impossible to prove cause and effect, but 41% of the crew developed cancer in the decades that followed, and 21% died from it. The 21% includes Wayne himself. These people didn't even die for a good movie. The Conqueror is absolutely horrible. Wayne portrays the great conqueror as a sort of cross between a square-shooting sheriff and a Mongolian idiot. Time wrote in a scathing review. The idea is good for a couple of Snickers, but after that, it never wanes, but it bores. But yeah, so I didn't have any problems with the death of John Wayne. Well, but yeah, no, that movie has always been, I know, heralded as being not only a terrible movie, but literally killed at least gave 41% of the cast and crew cancer. Yeah. And like I said, I know that sounds like, oh, how can we be sure? Because all these people smoked cigarettes back then. But that is well, you think about every other movie that's ever been worked on by people who smoke cigarettes, and that's not the same amount of people. So it's clear that was what happened.
What do you think of this list in general?
I mean, it's a total train wreck, like everything. And I'm not one of those people that craps on Rolling Stone all the time. Although Jan Venner recently, all the stuff with him has been like a total train wreck. But it is really bad.
But again, as we've been saying, I feel like they got conflicting ideas about what a quote worst decision is, and it's very subjective, anyways.
Yeah.
I very briefly. Because again, this Blue Plate special is about to end. Don't worry. Wanted to mention a little bit about the creator, which
I wanted to see yet didn't, and you didn't want to see yet did.
So that's the irony of life sometimes, right? It's the latest film from Gareth Edwards, who made the 2014 Godzilla, also Rogue One back in 2016. Has he even made a movie since then? I don't know. Real quick. No, he hasn't. It's fine. There's actually a lot of incredible villages. I don't know why I said that. Village Inn Pizza. Visuals in it. A lot of pretty good visuals. But it's a pretty bland sci-fi movie. He's really in the category of director of like Neil Blomkamp at this point. Joseph Kosinski was in that category for a while, but then he made like Top Gun Maverick, and so he kind of dug his way out of the hole a little bit with that. But it's like these guys of a certain age. It's like them all doing their Star Wars fanfic that they either officially or unofficially get to do. Because it says here, he cited Apocalypse Now, Baraka, which is very different.
Yeah.
Blade Runner, Akira, Rain Man, The Hit, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and Paper Moon. And it's one of those movies that to see it is like to see all of its influences on screen and be like, okay, so what?
Yeah.
Again, very well made, but so what? And it's one of those things like there are so few movies that are, quote, original sci-fi action movies of this scale. And it gets, those swings at the bat get wasted with something that's mediocre, just kind of makes you even more frustrated. But, again, John David Washington I generally like, and I really wish he had more opportunities. Because as we've talked about, Tenet kind of got buried for justified and sometimes unjustified reasons. And that seemed like it could have been a really big moment for him in terms of being the lead of these type of movies.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the circumstances that movie's released, kind of got buried, so he's not been in as many things. But he's fine in it. But again, and also it's a movie that has been written about and talked about already. Is kind of a lot racist, basically.
Yeah.
In terms of its depiction of Asian people in the future.
Yeah.
Of their wholehearted embrace of artificial intelligence and that they are these less than human forms or these evolved human forms is very problematic, to say the least.
Yeah.
So,
I wasn't aware of that whole controversy surrounding the movie necessarily.
Yeah. So again, I liked it fine enough as a visual experience, but again, it's something that I've literally been forgetting about as the days have gone by.
Oh,
so.
yeah, definitely.
But here we are. We're going to dive into, and again, prepare yourself.
To
obviously,
further prolong this
Vampyr came out in 1932.
Yeah.
And so it does not have a conventional trailer like even Isle of the Dead from 1945 has.
Yeah.
So what you're going to hear is a re-release, like, restoration trailer for it.
Yeah.
But I still think certainly the visuals, which you won't be able to see, but even the soundscape still does a good job of capturing the essence of what this movie is. So, and to that end, here's the trailer for Vampyr.
Haben Sie gehört? Gute Nacht.
Ooh, spooky, huh? Ooh,
Yeah.
As Ed Begley Jr. said.
Yeah.
As the Invisible Man, was it the son of the Invisible Man?
Yeah.
Right.
So obviously we're going to go probably through these movies a lot quicker than we did our Blue Plate Special, because to further prolong this introduction to, no, we're just going to go. Vampyr is a 1932 horror film directed by Danish director Carl Theodor Dreyer, or Dreyer. I'm not ever really sure how to pronounce that. But
say Dreyer, but
German film, it should be said, even though he's Dutch, or Danish, sorry. The film was written by Dreyer and Christian Jewell, based on elements from J. Sheridan LaFrown's 1972 collection of supernatural stories, In a Glass Darkly. It was funded by Nicholas de Gunsberg, who starred in the film. Oh, yeah, the main guy, named Julian West, among a mostly non-professional cast. Gunsberg plays the role of Alan Gray, a student of the occult who enters the village of Courtempiere, which is under the curse of a vampire. So basically, it is a vampire movie, but it's a very different one. I want to read here a little about, it talks a little bit about the making of the movie, just to kind of talk about it a little bit. Vampyr was challenging for Dreyer to make, as it was his first sound film and was required to be recorded in 3 languages. To overcome this, very little dialogue was used in the film, and much of the story is told with title cards, like a silent film. I noticed that we watched the movie. There are different versions of it you could watch, where it was the title card, the original title cards in German or Danish, probably German, with English subtitles, or you could just watch the version that made the kind of title cards instead. Yep. Although the title cards are primarily through books, not through actual. So that was something that was a little different even for that. It was shot entirely on location, and to enhance atmosphere and content, Dreyer opted for a washed-out, soft-focus photographic technique. Soundtrack was created in Berlin, where the characters' voices, sound effects, and score were recorded. So, obviously, that was common back then. But this is probably a first really big movie where they were like, oh, we're gonna do all it. Worry about the sound after the fact instead of at the time.
Well, you remember that scene in speaking of Babylon again of Hello College, like how hard even sound recording was even early on. Especially not even in America, because in America we made so many movies so quickly, it was like a factory. Already by 32, 33, sound was doable and okay, but obviously it was difficult to do in the very earliest days.
I'll say this, and then we'll get to the actual talking about the movie. And I don't think we necessarily need to go through the cast of either of these movies, because they're not a lot of people that we would know.
One big cast member in the next one.
Yeah, and we'll talk about him long enough. But Vampyr had a delayed release in Germany, open to a generally negative reception from audiences and critics. He edited the film after its German premiere and opened to more mixed opinions at its French debut. Long considered a low point in Dreyer's career, but modern critical reception of the film has become much more favorable, with critics praising the film's disorienting visual effects and atmosphere. So Dreyer obviously is most known, and kind of primarily, as the director of Passion of Joan of Arc, which is kind of
considered among the greatest films of all time.
And one of the last great silent films that a lot of people talk about. Of course, he made other movies as well. I know there was that movie Ordet that he made in the 50s that people talk a lot about. And also Day of Wrath from the 40s. I hear some people talk about here and there. But because I just, walk down the hallway at school and I'm like, oh my God, have you seen 1943's Day of Wrath? But anyway, what were your thoughts on this movie in general, or on Dreyer's approach to it, or any of that?
Well, it was interesting. You read all that about the kind of being made in multiple languages.
Yeah.
So much so that was actually a little bit of a obstacle, it sounded like, in terms of how we're going to do this.
Because sound just screws that all up. Because
obviously the title cards can be rewritten, and that's a pretty fixable, easy change to make. But the recorded sound,
especially in the legacy of German Expressionism, which had made such a big international statement of movies in general, how easy it was to just take that and then just translate it, obviously, and that kind of coming in the legacy of that, and then and it being a problem, was probably different.
So I think that actually works to the movie's benefit, and I think this fits to what I really love about like silent and early sound horror is just the primacy of the visual and maybe even the music above all else. That some of the most memorable aspects to me, a movie I think a lot about in terms of this era is Dracula. Mm-hmm. Which I think Frankenstein is a overall better movie, and I love it more. But I think weirdly to the point now that the 31 Dracula is kind of underrated, because I actually quite liked it, especially the most recent time I saw it. It really left an impression on me. Just like specifically moments of Bela Lugosi's face, and how it's not like the jump scares of today, but, and this is something you said about Vampyr going into it that I think is very true, is that it feels like one of the closest approximations to a nightmare that you've ever seen on screen in a real way. And that the dreamlike nature of it also, and again, sound kind of started to rob some of that poetic surrealism that was sometimes present in silent movies. Not as much in American silent movies, but still was there in some examples.
Because I think of movies like The Cat Creeps, which is a famously lost film, that we randomly talked about when we watched that movie Boo. We did did a commentary for, along with one of the horror movies we did at some point. And in that, there was some footage of that movie. It's the only footage that survives. But there's a lot of movies like that at that time that were these talkies, or right around basically the turn of the 30s, that were all very much look like or seemed like movies like that.
And so I really just think
whereas this is very different from that.
I just think it's the movie really works a lot, I think, because of its lack of dialogue, that inherently adds this tension, and also this, I feel like even more so now than they would have felt probably back in 32 when it came out, is sometimes confusion about what exactly is going on. And like, it's again, the transfer that we watched from Criterion did look pretty good. But obviously, being a movie that old, there's still some rough patches.
And it was intentionally looking that way,
and it intentionally
like you said,
looked dark and hard to make out some points. And so I think that really works to the movie's benefit, because horror movies work best to me when they're most mysterious, when they don't give you all the answers, when there are certain aspects of it that remain in shadow,
characters are drowned in sawdust.
But I just think that's a really strong approach, and most of the best horror movies in general to me are the ones that cloak themselves in that tradition of what exactly am I looking at here? Do I even want to see what I'm looking at here? And again, that that for a movie made in 1932, there's a ceiling for how, quote, extreme it can be.
Right.
But nonetheless, I feel like it stretches against the edge of that ceiling about as strong as anything I can think of from this era. You know?
And obviously there have been skulls in movies before this, but there's a lot of shots of skulls in this that feel perverse in a way that they hadn't even before. I mean, you think about a movie like Haxan, which we saw here a while back, which I was not as into as I thought I would be.
I liked it.
I was kind of lightly disappointed by that, because that movie was something I always heard a lot about.
It does have some signature visuals.
But I just wasn't as into that. But like I said, that comes. That's another European. I think that was partly a German production. It was made a lot of different places. That and Faust and a lot of these movies of the time. Where is it? Sweden. Okay, yeah. And Faust and obviously German Expressionism. Movies like that do still feel really weird. This is one of those that is in that weird. What makes it stand out even from the German Expressionism, though, is it's even in another kind of weird horror genre all to its own, because it's that talky horror genre that isn't, though, still even like Frankenstein or Dracula.
Movies, yeah.
It's just its own thing. It totally stands outside of all that. And I know there's got to be a couple more movies around that time that are like that too, but I just really haven't seen anything quite like that, especially even as a vampire legend either, because it's not exactly the most vampire movie ever.
Well, I was going to say as well that this is something I thought about watching it, and I think in its own way has a place to talk about with Isle of the Dead, even though it's different, is that I feel like in the West, when I say the West, I'm talking about like America and like Western civilization in general, Europe, that what started in the 31 Dracula movie was like this canonization of vampires / Dracula specifically, and that so much of vampire legend, while not always totally invented by that movie, was certainly canonized by that movie. And that there's a pretty good chance that Dreyer and audiences in Europe maybe did not even get to see that by 32, even though, it was within a year later. So, like, you think about something like Nosferatu, which is, of course, also one of the most famous vampire movies. That was when vampires in film in general were allowed to be weirder than they are now, because, again, I feel like, I really think a lot of the 31 Dracula, but this happens with any movie that's just such a success, that it kind of canonizes and puts into stone what Dracula or vampires are in movies in a way that subsequent decades either solidified or in some cases went up against. Like, Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Coppola movie, of course, flies in the face of those examples intentionally. But again, 31 Dracula, a lot of things that went after that set the stage and kind of set in stone how vampires are depicted in movies. And this was still at that era where that influence was not exactly felt just yet, and so vampire legend was still allowed to be, quote, weirder and more surreal than it became
follow
after
Nosferatu either,
right?
And so it's very different.
And that was another movie that again I thought about too, was Nosferatu, because German Expressionism clearly had an influence and an impact on this, but it is a different thing too. It is a little more.
Because it's definitely not the Golem or Cabinet of Dr. Caligari or anything like that, which is very explicitly German Expressionist, like weird visuals.
And I feel like, too, I mean, those German Expressionist movies are definitely weird and have their own moments. But there is sometimes this logic that eventually falls into place and has to set it a certain direction to resolve it. I mean, in that way, too, there is some of that even with this in terms of, oh, the day is saved, it's all wrapped up and good.
But it's not... It gets there in the weirdest way possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's not in a conventional way.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the most normal moment in the movie is the ending. Even everything before that is not normal. Everything about this is weird other than that. Like,
yeah. And I you know, in general, I just really love these movies or these types of things that give way to this very expressionistic, dreamlike quality. Because I feel like that's something that, you know, again, to get into dream logic in movies and maybe compare this to things that come later, that's one of the best things about movies is that they kind of inherently allow us to go into that logic and not have to explain itself, you know.
Right.
And I feel like things that are older, too, fall more even into that convention than things that come later where, you know, it's like, oh, I got to have an explanation. Or you think about, you know, one of the biggest people that gets talked about with dream logic, of course, in the modern era, contemporary cinema, is David Lynch. That we try to place meaning on a movie like Lost Highway. Like, we have to have an explanation for why the things happen the way they do. And, you know, and there's, you know, depends on what movie you're watching. Sometimes you want order restored and you want something to, quote, totally make sense. But that's somebody like Lynch who operates from this surrealist tradition. He gives into the beauty of, let's just go with it. You know, just go
what
with the
I
dream
love
logic
about
of it.
Lost Highway in particular is that it begins with a highway and it ends with a highway. No, I'm being serious. It's like it starts with the opening, the same image and it's almost like nothing that happened meant anything, because I'm not even just saying.
Was it almost like you said? It's like, did I just am I driving down the highway and I kind of fall asleep for a little bit and I imagine all that and then I wake back up? again?
And I mean, he does say life is a highway, is what he's saying. But no, I mean, but really, like, it almost, and then that just forgives the whole movie in its own way, because it's like, well, it's literally where it started, where it began, it ended. It didn't really mean anything, and
when I say what I'm about to say, I'm not even meaning this in a pejorative way. It's a beautiful bit of nonsense. It's just like, you know, it's just like, well, sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. But I'm not going to let that get in my way of having a good time.
Oh yeah, and it's the kind of movie that can like be like, oh, Richard Pryor's here, randomly old Richard Pryor's in this scene, and then the same scene, it's like using like Lou Reed's cover of This Magic Moment as like Rosanna Arquette gets out of the car.
Like, who did that version of that song?
Yeah, and it's like one of the greatest moments in movie history. Literally, it's like so. It's like it doesn't matter what any of this means because it's just cool as hell. Like, you know, it's just like I don't care. Like,
and that's what I really love about this era of early horror is it obviously that's in many ways the original filmic versions of that idea or that expression.
Yeah.
And you know, again, I feel like, you know, some of the other strongest horror movies that came later, something like The Shining, I mean, it has its own Kubrickian version of that. But that, of course, comes from kind of Kubrick's perspective, which is something totally kind of different, exactly, than pure surrealness for surrealness' sake. But yeah, that's Vampyr. Any other thoughts about it? We weren't going to talk as much about it because it's a hard movie to talk about, honestly, because of how surreal it is.
No, I mean, and I'm not just saying it literally needs to be seen to be believed, because there's some stuff in it that I'm like, even just visually, there's that image I'm sure you remember of like the sign of the motel, and it's like it's like this weird angle, and it's like the angel is part of the sign or whatever. Yeah. That literally looks like a photograph from like a 1990s No Wave album or something. And it's just like, but it was in the 30s.
Yeah.
And it's like, when is this? Where is this? Like,
well, that's the thing too. It
like
disorients
out of
you
time.
It disorients you in a way that is very haunting and very.
And obviously,
exquisite.
that style of like what I was talking about was inspired by things like that. But it just. But the way it's shot feels so real. It's not overly lit, and it like I said, we've talked about that before with European cinema of the 30s, in particular, of like Jean Vigo or even Jean Renoir, and just the way their movies don't look like anything else because they're not, and they shoot on location and they're not in a studio the whole time lit with key lighting and all this stuff. Which I'm not even saying that to be like, oh, Hollywood movies, old Hollywood sucked. It's just something totally different.
Yeah, I mean, again, I have a real love and affinity for that era of Hollywood, but like you said, it's just they've made so many movies in Hollywood. They quote had a style and a standard of general quality, but at the same time, you just see so many of them and they look the same way. Versus what you saw in Europe at that same time, and they just didn't quite have those conventions, which creatively led to just a lot of weird, interesting, different-looking things, you know. So, check it out. It might be one of those movies that's so public domain by this point, it might even
it might be
on
easy
YouTube.
to find. I don't know, because I've got the Criterion,
which look good.
Yeah.
But, and I think there's even been some other restorations that have come out since that have been put out. So, check out Vampyr however you can. But up next... This is I thought this movie looked beautiful on the Warner Archive Blu-ray that we got for it. Here is the trailer for Isle of the Dead.
No one may leave the island.
I'm afraid you'll have to make an exception in my case, General. I'm traveling on urgent business for my government.
No one may leave the island.
I don't know what's the matter with the General. Something up here. You'd better stay out of his way.
Look. She's dead. Look into the eyes of that one. You'll see how she died.
What do you mean, spying on us like this? You feel that Thea is some sort of evil influence. Was that it? What are you going to do about it?
When I am sure, I will destroy her.
A beautifully 40s trailer,
Oh, yeah. Well,
by the
before
way.
we get to that, as Boris Karloff once kind of said, Isle of Dead.
I love Dead.
Yeah, but instead of I love Dead. But, man, Bride of Frankenstein, what a useless ad movie that is.
That's one of those movies that I keep scratching my head at, and I hear people talk about it, and I'm like,
They're
am I
smoking
missing
crack or
something? Like,
Yeah.
because I think it's good.
Well,
but I think Frankenstein is like one of the
I love
greatest
James Whale. I mean,
horror
anytime,
movies, period.
any James Whale movie, I'm going to be inherently defensive of to a point. But that movie, I just can never get behind because it's like, it's taken what was so great about the simplicity of Frankenstein and then saying, let's do this and make
Well,
it
clearly
work.
has a bigger budget. That might be what people respond to with it.
Yeah.
In a way, I don't know. It does look more visually, quote, sophisticated.
Yeah, I just...
But
that's what's so great about the original Frankenstein.
Well,
is
is
it
that
didn't always look
uncanny?
like that.
Oh, no, I
Yeah,
agree, but I'm
right.
saying that...
No, I know
just
you know that. I'm
in a
just saying,
general
yeah.
budgetary sense,
Yeah.
it is a bigger, more, movie
Yeah.
that has more. And
Yeah.
it does have... And I don't think this is a criticism. It's just weird. It opens with that whole Mary Shelley
That's
intro.
so weird.
But she didn't even
Yeah.
write Bride of Frankenstein. I mean, well, there is a Bride of Frankenstein-esque moment in...
The original
novel
yes.
of Frankenstein,
but that didn't even happen.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's
This
so
is very weird.
That movie's so weird. I don't really like it. But anyway,
that's
anyway,
definitely the most like successful in quotes of the Universal Monster sequels, though. Right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's the one that's definitely. I mean, most people assume it's the best Universal Monster movies. Period.
There are Invisible Man sequels that are better than that movie, though.
I know we've done Invisible Man in the past year.
Right.
Big on him. All right.
Anyway, Isle of the Dead.
Isle of the Dead is actually not from Universal.
No, it's from RKO.
It's from RKO, Randy Orton production. No.
Yeah.
RKO. 1945
Never
horror
thought about
film.
that actually, but
no, for years I thought about how his finishing
Yeah.
move is named after the studio, and it's a KO, like knocking them out. But anyways, 1945 horror film directed by Mark Robson, made for RKO Radio Pictures, which I just love that was the title of something. RKO Radio Pictures. By producer Val Lewton, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. Film script was inspired by the painting Isle of the Dead, which I was not even aware of this painting.
Yeah, I was looking at that. I've seen it before, but I didn't know what it was called. Wow.
It says here also
what an image.
About that prints were very popular in Central Europe of the early 20th century. Vladimir Nabokov observed in his 1936 novel Despair that they could be, quote, found in every Berlin home. That weirdly also portends and predicts like Nazism in a roundabout way too, don't you find?
Well, in a stylistic obsession.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Which appears behind the title credits. Though the film was originally titled Camilla during production. It was written by frequent Luton collaborator Ardell Ray. Stars Boris Karloff. Isle of the Dead is the second of 3 films Luton made with Karloff, and the 4th of 5 pictures Robson made for Luton. Real quick, I just want to look at Mark Robson here.
I've heard his name from
some other movies he directed. Well, he actually edited, assistant editor uncredited for Citizen Kane.
Well, I figured him working for RKO.
Also, Magnificent Emerson's assistant editor uncredited. So he is actually secretly maybe behind. While we can't find Magnificent Emerson's.
God. Yeah.
He also, so it sounded like he started off as an editor. He edited Cat People.
Yeah.
Journey into Fear. Have you seen that?
No.
I don't know if I have. I don't think I have. I Walked with a Zombie and The Leopard Man. And then he directed movies all the way through the 70s, actually.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to see if there's anything I've seen.
I've heard of Bright Victory.
Yeah, Edge of Doom.
Yeah.
1954. Yeah. Bridges of Toko-Ri, I've always heard of that as that William Holden movie.
Mm-hmm.
Harder They Fall, that was that was the last Humphrey Bogart movie. So I knew I'd heard his name somewhere. Peyton Place. The End of the Sixth Happiness, I've always heard of that too. Here
The Prize, that's a Paul Newman movie.
Limbo. Oh, Earthquake.
Oh, wow.
And Avalanche Express. Oh my God, I gotta see that. Look at that. Oh my God. Lee Marvin, Robert Shaw, Maximilian Schell. Oh my God, my balls are clapping. Literally, what is that? Like, struggle over defecting Soviet general. Oh yeah.
Said Vincent Canby of New York Times criticized the film's tacking to sign me up.
Yeah. Oh, Valley of the Dolls also he made.
Yeah.
Lost Command.
So he actually has quite a history and made some bigger movies here and there.
9 Hours to Rama. What?
But this movie's essentially set during what would for most Americans be a pretty obscure conflict and war. The Balkan Wars of the 1913.
So right before
World War
I, yeah.
And basically is about this general played by Boris Karloff, who is basically kind of overwatching this area and is forcing all of these people that are there to have to stay in this place in the midst of this plague that's sweeping through and killing everybody on the island. So it's a movie that probably randomly got watched during COVID, which was kind of funny as far as the quarantine taking place. And it kind of depicts Karloff, obviously, as he's this general who's mad with power and that he's trying to, control all these people. And there's a little bit towards the beginning of his anger about these local peasants who have robbed the graves of these...
Mark Robson, yeah.
The graves of these valuable Greek artifacts. And so, again, I came across looking for possible vampire movies, and this came up as a, quote, vampire movie. And it is in a very, very loose way. I mean, again, it has more in common with, like, the 30s and 40s conceptions of the undead or zombieism than it does with traditional vampire lore of what we consider that now.
Yeah. I mean, it reminded me a lot of The Thing.
Also that,
Yeah, which I don't know if Who Goes There by John W. Campbell Jr., who wrote that original novella, if that was an inspiration.
When did that come out, by the way?
1930s,
okay.
Late 30s. I don't know, but yeah, so it feels to me more like, and it randomly reminded me a lot of Black Narcissus in certain ways, particularly the climax.
Yeah.
which was made after this.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's a weird. It's a really weird movie to add with all these Val Lewton movies too, who we'll talk about in a minute, but it doesn't really fit along with those in the sense of what his movies usually try to accomplish. It feels like him trying to do more of a talkie, literally.
Yeah.
Like there's not as much visual flair going on, which I think is why it's not as good as the others. But
Levi, you're more of an expert on all this than me. Talk about who is Val Lewton and what separates him from the Universal monster movie, horror movie that also was in existence around this time.
Well, obviously, Universal was the primary
studio
that produced horror films. You know even more about this than me. What types of movies were produced by who?
Obviously, like MGM, they were more the musicals.
And Columbia was more of what? I don't know.
Well, Columbia had different things going on. Sometimes they were just more. They produced some of the biggest screwball comedies, but also, I mean, they all did a little bit of everything,
right?
Because they all were
Brothers
competing
was
with
the gangster movie.
The gangster movie.
Right.
Fox and Warner Brothers to an extent later on did a lot of westerns. John Ford made a lot of his movies through Fox. So they all had their own little specialties, even though they all did a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Obviously, Universal's was the thing that's most remembered and iconic as their monster movies of the 30s and 40s.
Right. And so there were a lot of these.
Which then kind of, I feel like, evolved into thrillers too as time went by,
Yeah.
But.
So RKO made a lot of different types of movies. Obviously, Citizen Kane is the one we always think of. But they also randomly made, in the 30s, it should be noted, the Frederick March, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is probably the biggest 30s horror movie I can think of that wasn't made by Universal, as far as one that people still talk about or think about.
Yeah.
Also, it's important to note that Columbia Pictures in the 40s made that movie Mark of the Vampire, which is not all that good, but is like a World War II monster vampire movie, which sounds like, what the hell does that mean? I don't know. Go watch the movie, because I couldn't figure it out either.
Yeah.
But Val Lewton as a producer, which is primarily what he always did, made a lot of movies with them, and Cat People being the first major one. I Walk with the Zombie, which is probably my kind of favorite one. And that movie's very complicated racially, but I feel like actually acquits itself pretty well about what it's saying. The Leopard Man, The Seventh Victim, The Ghost Ship, Curse of the Cat People, which is a sequel to Cat People, is one of the weirdest movies I've ever seen. Very interesting movie. Not exactly a horror movie either. Mademoiselle Fifi. Never heard of that.
The poster, by
Youth
the way.
Runs Wild. The Body Snatcher, which was made the same year as Isle of the Dead, and then Bedlam.
Yeah.
After that, what I remember most about Cat People and I Walk with a Zombie, which are probably the two best of all of these, is the immense atmosphere. And what worked about these, and Body Snatcher I also think a lot about too, and I'll talk about that here in a few minutes. But that what worked about these movies is that they had genuine jump scares and genuine imagery that was actually frightening or surprising. That I felt like
certainly more off kilter than maybe some of the Universal
especially by the 1940s. I mean,
Yeah.
at this point in the 40s, the Universal movies were literally cartoons and comic books. I mean, literally at this point, the same year that this was made, of Isle of the Dead, literally the year before, in 44, you had House of Frankenstein, which actually isn't that bad of a movie. It's pretty average. There's things about that I kind of like. And then in 45, House of Dracula, which is one of the worst.
Yeah.
And these types of movies, at this point, making them these Universal monster movies, were literally just be it, total bull s. Like, I mean, it was literally just like, get all the monsters together and they fight each other, and the plots are ridiculous and they look very slick, and they're not like the Mummy or Frankenstein or Dracula.
This is an easy example, but don't you feel like that's exactly the path that superhero movies have taken, and very clearly parallels, I feel like, with this particular era.
So this happened quicker back then, though, than it did because they made more movies, so by nature of that, that's how it was.
But in terms of that, what felt original and felt like its own little spark was flamed away pretty quickly, but they kept producing so many of them.
But so what worked about Val Lewton's movies were not only the subject matter was slightly different in the sense of cat people, was similar to obviously something like The Wolfman, but in an urban environment and in using a female instead of a male.
Yeah.
And that reminds me more of Werewolf of London than it does The Wolfman.
Yeah.
And then I Walk with a Zombie, which is about voodoo in the Caribbean somewhere. I can't remember. I think it was Haiti, but I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. That movie is really interesting, though, visually, and just really good. And then even The Body Snatcher, which came out after, or kind of the same year, actually, as Isle of the Dead, being an adaptation of the Robert Louis Stevenson novel. And all of these, for the most part, are supernatural in some form and have something going on in them, obviously.
Yeah.
And I think all the time about the ending of The Body Snatchers being probably the scariest thing in a movie that old that I can think of. More sonically than anything.
Yeah.
Than even just what's literally being seen. But that's where this one falters, I think, a little bit, because, like I said, it focuses a lot on this paranoia, which was kind of ahead of its time. It reminds me a lot of the Oxbow it's in it, too, kind of like what that was for the Western, this kind of is for the horror movie of like, yeah, it's a Western, or yeah, it's a horror movie, but it's kind of about these other things, and you know, in that nature.
And definitely, this movie in its own way is about this wariness with war and the effect that war is having on Boris Karloff's general character. The other characters seem kind of nonplussed and insulated from it. He's somebody who's been on the front lines and have seen it, and obviously coming out in 1945, you know, it's the events depicted are even pre-World War I. This is very much, I feel like, in a roundabout way, about the wariness of World War II era and the audiences there, and how perhaps insulated they are from the actual genuine frontline horrors that it faced. And that while Boris Karloff essentially becomes the villain, that we kind of understand that how he's become so mad and crazy is because of that wariness that's been put on him.
And then he feels like he can't even control what's happening in his own army, but then he's like, oh, I can control these people. These are civilians. I can tell them what to do. And like how that works out for him, obviously, and how that works out for everybody else. But for the most part, nothing really happens in this movie. It's kind of just people walking around and talking, and I'm not gonna. And I was bored through a majority of it. I'll be honest, I wasn't really that into it. But the climax obviously was very interesting, and specifically, I feel like it reminded me a lot of the climax of Black Narcissus. But another movie this randomly reminds me of, which I actually think is kind of a good movie, is She-Wolf of London, which came out a year after this. Which, and this is inherently spoiling that movie a little bit, but without saying too much, is similar in the fact that it's about this kind of paranoia and an assumption that things are happening.
Yeah.
But what's even different about that movie is that it turns out there wasn't any She-Wolf of London.
Yeah.
There is no supernatural aspect to that movie, and it's actually about the psychological turmoil that is going on in this household and assumptions people are making about other people, and kind of it being literally about a paranoid thriller rather than, and then it turns out, there never was any actual werewolf. And I think that, and I know that movie was hated at the time, and a lot of people, fans of Universal horror, don't like it because it is that way. That's one of the, when I was in the middle of watching those movies, I was like so bored that I was like, oh, wait a second,
totally,
what? Like, oh, this is
air.
actually something different, and it's not the best movie, and it's barely better than this. But it reminds me a lot of that, of like kind of the anticlimax of it. And this was, though, while also saying, no, there are these supernatural aspects going on. That wasn't really part of that. But anyway.
And I feel like a movie like this that liked pretty good. I was not totally in love with, but it just, again, similar to what I said about Vampyr, but in a different way, is that just the atmosphere and the aesthetics are just feel so grand and rich, and that's why these movies,
the location is
have the
different,
potential
too.
to hold up so well too.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something true that's different about it. And again, what I appreciated too was that its attempt to kind of take a horror movie and make it a little bit about the effects of war, on people, and that difference in civilians versus obviously military life and military, people involved, soldiers in the military. And so, again, I was a little nonplussed by the plot itself, but those aesthetics and that feeling is something that I really responded to and remember.
Yeah.
This movie doesn't have a lot of stars you would immediately recognize. It does happen to have the guy who played Alfred in
Alan Napier. Yeah.
Alan Napier from the '60s show. But I wanted to maybe end this discussion talking a little bit about Boris Karloff, who I don't know if we formally talked about on this show before or not.
Yeah, I mean, we have in some way, I'm sure.
Trying to remember where we did. With what movie we would have done. But anyways, one thing I was thinking about is, he's the name on the poster. He's the most, really one of the most well-known horror icons. And that, he's mostly known for playing the bad guys, but then sometimes he played the good guys in some of these movies, or certainly fighting for good, or maybe even the anti-hero who's, and this he's kind of, by virtue of nothing else, the villain.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Villain of circumstance.
Yeah, what do you think of Karloff in this movie as kind of the antagonist, and how it fits into his larger legacy in terms of the footprint he's left on the genre?
He randomly looks Greek. I'll say that in a way that I was surprised. I was like, okay, all right, fine.
Enough to pass.
But he was very English. I mean, but because his name's literally like Henry Englishman or something. His actual name is so English it'll make you laugh.
It is.
Let's see.
William Henry Pratt.
Yeah, I knew it was something like that.
And occasionally billed as Karloff the Uncanny.
Oh yeah, because that was in The Mummy. It's like Karloff the Uncanny. It's like. What? Like, was he a daggum freak in a the geek show or something? Well, I don't know, but anyway,
his father was Anglo-Indian, was a British father and an Indian mother, which means he was at least a quarter Indian himself. His mother also had some Indian ancestry. Thus, Karloff had a relatively dark complexion that differed from his peers at the time.
Yeah, actually does kind of make sense. I never knew that, but him in this, I mean, yeah, he's good overall. But I mean, it's interesting. It shoots him in a way that it's making these assumptions about our knowledge about him as Karloff. Like, there's parts where he's just standing there leering, and people look at him, and it's like it's supposed to look like he's the Frankenstein's monster or something.
Yeah.
But it's just him in a military uniform standing there, and it's kind of not that it doesn't work. I'm not saying that, but it's just kind of funny when you think about it, because like this is the Karloff shot, and it's just him just standing there.
Don't you find that another thing I was thinking too is that now this is true of most Hollywood movies of this era, but even more so with horror compared to now, is how star-driven horror was back then, especially in comparison to now.
Yeah.
Because even now it's like, oh, Adam Sandler is a comedy star. He's going to do a comedy movie. Or Arnold Schwarzenegger, any
now
action
it's the
star,
slasher villain, and it doesn't matter who plays him because they've got a mask.
Or like, I mean, I think the closest you might have is like Jamie Lee Curtis has been in different kinds of horror movies, even though it's mostly the Halloween movies.
Right.
But like, you don't have
Prom Night or whatever.
You don't have quote horror stars in the same way you do for other genres. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not expecting an answer, but I'm just open-endedly or rhetorically like wondering why that is. I guess, like you said, I guess it's because so many horror villains, it's about being in the makeup or having a mask on, so it could presumably be, quote, anybody.
It could just be a stunt man. I mean, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
I just find that to be fascinating, because in every other genre, you still have, they're a, quote, star of this genre.
Yeah, I mean, the only version that I can think of is, like, Robert Englund, but he's not like a horror actor, though, exactly,
Yeah.
But anyway, so it's kind of just in that way, like I said, it's different now. But yeah, I mean, he was in so many movies. He was in like over 200 movies, and so it's like,
and and I think, now obviously we don't produce as many movies, and so you almost wonder to what extent audiences of this time would have even taken somebody like him for granted or put a ceiling on him, because as we've alluded to in the past, like one of his greatest movies and performances was in Targets, which was a very late career move for him, and was kind of somebody like Bogdanovich, who was a young director at the time, kind of like, you can tell, delighting in working with Boris Karloff, but using him in a very unconventional way, because audiences in the late 60s would have been like, oh, that's Frankenstein, or all the other just purely, frankly, unsophisticated or uninteresting glut of horror movies he would have starred in by that point. And that's why that movie Targets is just like, oh, wow, that's just so you kind of alluded to it earlier, but what does this rank for you in the Luton?
Oh, it's at the bottom of all the ones I've seen so far, especially in comparison to Body Snatcher, which is just so strong. I like what they were going for, but even as a vampire movie, even aside from not being fully a vampire movie, not that it even billed itself as that exactly, we kind of pigeonholed it as that.
Yeah.
It just isn't really much of anything, not even in a bad way. It's just kind of like,
I think it gets by a lot on atmosphere and environment, and the text itself is pretty weak, but again, it does offer a little bit of an alternative, as you said, to what the universal mainstream thing would have been. But nonetheless, the transfer looked gorgeous. Warren Archive version looked good. So we didn't have as much to say on those as we could have, but that's all right.
I think we'll have a lot more to say on the next week's movie.
Yeah, so that's Isle of the Dead. Check it out. Again, this is
Isle of Dead.
Vampyr and Isle of the Dead. I think they would work good together. Yeah. Again, both black and white horror movies. If you're
both about 70 minutes long. So
the next two, though, are most certainly in color. Jeff Probst.
You should have seen it in color.
Jeff Probst. What have we got next week?
Stay tuned for scenes from our next episode.
I see dead people.
In your dreams? While you're awake? Dead people like in graves and coffins?
Walking around like regular people. They don't see each other. They only see what they want to see. They don't know they're dead.
How often do you see them?
All the time. They're everywhere.
You should have seen the dead people in color. They're here.
You heard, of course, from Poltergeist from 1982 and The Sixth Sense from 1999. I told us a while back that we'd be dipping back into the 90s ever so briefly with one of the biggest movies of not only 99 but the 90s.
One of the biggest movies ever because it's the highest grossing horror film of all time.
Which is still crazy. That's still held up, by the way. That there's still not something that's come along and been even more than that.
Not even adjusted for inflation.
Yeah. And I feel like something now, it would be a Halloween movie or it would be in a franchise. It wouldn't just be probably an original, end quote. I feel like Jordan Peele has the potential to make something that could be
everybody to
like
David
that.
Gordon Green's like, miracles. You know they don't happen anymore. Like, you know.
Poltergeist from 1982. Neither one of us have actually seen this movie.
No, I've seen the remake.
Mm-hmm.
But not the original. Same thing happened with Carrie, where I saw that one first before that.
We've been wanting to watch this for years, so we were like, oh, this, obviously Poltergeist and Sixth Sense are ghost stories in their own way. Yep. That's why we paired them together. Poltergeist, it has a very famous behind-the-scenes history that is as much of the story of the movie as anything happening in the movie itself. Of course, that Tobe Hooper did Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which we've, of course, done on the podcast before. Done it, directed it. But there's all these conflicting reports that exist that producer Steven Spielberg, you might have heard of him, actually directed the movie.
That he was contractually ineligible to technically direct the movie or take credit because of some it basically made the same year as E.T. and he couldn't make two movies at the same time or something.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what it is.
So I know, though, over the years, he's always said, no, Tobe Hooper directed more of that and blah, blah, blah. But we'll get into all that next week because I don't know all the history of that, honestly, about who made it and why. But it clearly is just visually looks like a Spielberg product in a lot of ways.
Well, I mean, was it produced by Amblin officially?
I think so.
I think it was. So, I mean, what a year. I mean, obviously you made one of the greatest films of all time, highest grossing movie of all time at that point.
And Poltergeist made a lot of money, too.
And Poltergeist was also a big hit.
And also it was a rated R hit, too, I think.
Yeah, and I think one thing...
No, actually, that is PG, I think. Let me look that up, because I always forget. Yeah, it is PG, but it's got some stuff in it that's
It probably was one of those movies that pushed the envelope in terms of the need for PG-13.
Because I've never seen this movie, but yeah, because it was made for 10.7, and it made 121.7
So it was a big hit.
Yeah. But this is one of those movies that, to me, is... I see images from...
Yeah.
And I'm just like, holy crap, that looks like some stuff I'm just like blown away by it. They really did that in a movie? Like, it's just like, wow.
Especially in a movie that was as mainstream in as roundabout way as it was.
Yeah.
So we're very much looking forward to Poltergeist. And it definitely has one of the most famous, iconic movie lines of the 80s, which you heard earlier with They're Here.
And you heard me say it as Jamie Johnson would have said
it. So we're very much looking forward to that. The Sixth Sense, which we're also doing.
You have seen it, I have not.
I've seen it. One of the most iconic twists of all time to the point now where it'd be a twist if you didn't know what the twist was at this point. Levi already knows what that is.
Yeah.
As you probably are, even if you've not even seen the movie. We've never formally done a Shyamalan movie on the pod. We have talked about Old and Knock at the Cabin, which come out, it's hard to believe, this year, early in the year. So we've talked about Shyamalan in passing.
And I've seen some of his other movies here and there.
But never did one fully on the pod. Again, this movie, I remember when it came out. I was young. I didn't see it when it came out. But I remember seeing the poster, and I remember what a massive success it was, I could tell, and also like how many people were watching it and seeing it and talking about it. And again, it's only like once in so many generations a horror movie really has that level of water cooler conversation or impact, right? I mean, you think about
Because I wouldn't count The Silence of the Lambs as that, because I know everybody always says, "Oh, that's a big horror movie, won Best Picture." It ain't a horror movie. Move on.
But like The Exorcist, or
right,
like
that,
that level, or I think the most recent example is something like Get Out in terms of a conversation movie that is, again, it's well liked by critics,
like
but also
Psycho
it's a big hit.
was a version
Psycho
of that.
certainly is. And so Sixth Sense definitely is in that category. I'm not a huge Bruce Willis fan. I do think that is among the better Bruce Willis performances, though.
Among his better hairpiece choices, no.
Haley Joel Osment also has one of the most memorable child performances of all time in that. I think he's even better in AI, but he is quite good in that as well. Levi, somebody who's not seen it but has heard so much about it, what are you looking forward to or interested in going into it? Prepare for it in 2 weeks.
Yeah, for me, just to see, just really to represent, all right, I need to just really dip into Shyamalan, because he's not somebody that I've watched growing up, even as a budding cinephile. That was just never, not even intentionally, just movies that I never watched.
And there's a lot of people that he is.
Like
he got people
that,
into movies.
Signs, Unbreakable.
Yeah.
I've never seen any of those. I've seen The Village, which I quite like, actually, and most people don't, which,
The
whatever.
Visit also. Did you see that?
No, I haven't seen
That's
that.
good, yeah.
And I know the twist of that, too.
Yeah.
But
not
The
seen Lady in
Village,
the Water.
No. The Village actually didn't know what the twist of that was, and then I was like, even though I could kind of predict it was going to be something like that, I didn't know definitively. And then having seen Old and Knock at the Cabin, but yeah, there's just as far as his big original stuff, it will literally start as, okay, I'm starting to watch these, and also just to see a movie that made such a massive impact that I haven't seen, that I feel like I have seen in a way,
right?
But yeah, that'll just be big, and I'm looking forward to that, regardless of what I think of it.
I always like reminding people that, because that was the movie he became most
I knew
known
that
from,
wasn't his first movie.
But this movie, Wide Awake, which he did before that, which looks just so random.
Even before that, he did that movie Praying with Anger, but...
Yeah. But this was his, breakthrough hit by far. This actually was the second highest grossing movie in 1999. Behind episode 1, which is, we talked about way back when.
That's crazy that the highest grossing horror movie ever is still the second of that year.
Yeah. Yeah. And also that it actually even outgrossed Toy Story 2, which, I mean, was...
And even as much money as the Blair Witch Project made, which was not number 10, but still made a lot of money.
Well, that was really well known for how small the budget was and how it, obviously made all, for what the budget was, just for inflation. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to both of those movies. Again, they're both ghost movies in their own way, so... That'll be another Spooktober Spooktacular. But wait, there's more.
Frankenberry cereal is coming your way. How about a monster for breakfast today?
Want a hanky-franky?
Thanks. And how about some wonderful Frankenberry cereal with oodles and oodles of strawberry-flavored marshmallows. And Frankenberry is part of this good, nutritious breakfast. Here comes Calchocula. Wish you could stay. How about a monster for breakfast today?
All you overlapping dialogue fans know, you know what time it is.
You know what time it is. Chocolate starfish.
Keep on rolling, baby.
There was a kid who asked me this week, do you like corn? No, I haven't really heard them. You like Limp Bizkit? And I was like, well, I've heard their music. I was thinking, yeah, in a certain way, I guess I do, but anyway.
But, not really,
but,
though,
No.
But deeply, also. Anyways,
I always forget
it's Spooktober Spooktacular.
This type of cereal always kind of smells like wet dog.
So you know what time it is.
You know what time it is. Put your hands up.
We've got to try the new monster cereals. When I say new, they're not new. They've been around for a while. But this year, we're doing Frankenberry.
So first year, I think we did Boo Berry, or we did Count Chocula, and then we did Boo Berry last year.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
So now Frankenberry. So we're going to give you a little taste
This one,
test.
by the way, it's like pink, and it's got marshmallows with it.
That's strawberry flavored.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Yeah, that's not.
I do like it.
Yeah, it's good. interesting, you know. I guess we got a couple left we got to do. I think we got Yummy Mummy and Fruit Brute, and then they got that Monster Mash cereal too. That's kind of like all of it put together.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I like this. Got the little candies in there.
Yeah.
Marshmallows.
To further prolong this eating of... No, just kidding.
Where's this rank for you in terms of the other ones?
To be honest, they're all pretty similar.
Yeah.
I like this or Blueberry probably most. I'm not a big chocolate cereal person in general. So...
Yeah. I do like Cocoa Puffs.
Yeah. Reese's Puff.
But,
I was going to say something else about all this.
Any last parting thoughts for the listeners before we call it today?
Oh, the reason why we're not doing this next week, or next time, like we probably would, to end it on, you know, that kind of note, is because our family's like, when are we opening the Frankenberry? When are we opening the Frankenberry? So we went ahead and did it as soon as we could.
To make the household happy.
Yeah, anyway.
So, because we love them, and we want everybody to be happy. Hope you're happy at the end of this episode of Real Rapid Dialogue. This is Kyle.
This is Levi.
Take care. God bless.
I want you to put the chicken